What's up, everyone? In this episode, we have Cal, who is a Norse pagan, a certified strength and conditioning coach, and an Army veteran of the US military. Unfortunately, the conversation turned out to be a lot more serious than I wanted it to. I didn't have time to goof off because I was way too interested in what he had to say. Hopefully, next time he comes around, we can goof off. And if you wish to support me or Cal in any way, shape, or form, please don't hesitate. Check out the description box. All the links will be there. And that's it. Enjoy. Everybody, welcome. I got a interesting guest today. I'm not gonna do his introduction. He can do it himself. It's been a very short time since I've met him, but I've grown a liking to him. He's very straight to the point. So the stage is yours, Cal. Go for it.
Hey,
Introduce yourself.
thank you, Turk. Appreciate that. Yeah, my name's Cal. My handle is Crixus, and yeah, I don't know. I appreciate the kind words. I don't know that I'm super interesting, but I'm glad that I agreed to come on your podcast. I think we're gonna have fun.
Yeah, for sure. A couple of things that really struck me about how you introduced yourself to me in the last couple of weeks was that you said that you were an ex-army. What's the right terminology?
Yeah, yeah, sure.
Is it
Ex-army, former army. Yeah.
former army? Like you're not. It's not classified as a veteran, right? That's different.
No, it is. It
It is.
is.
Okay.
Anybody that has served in the military is classified as a veteran.
Oh, okay. Well, ex-army veteran or army veteran rather, army veteran,
Mm-hmm.
and also a certified strength and conditioning coach.
Mm-hmm.
And you also have a religion that's not very followed, and that's also what I'm kind of interested in because I'm interested in mythology and more specifically Norse mythology with all the
Mm-hmm.
Ragnarok stuff happening around, and especially nowadays with like the Avengers coming up. It really sparked my interest to look into it, and it was very interesting. So, um, I don't want this to be an interview. That's the last thing I want. I just want to talk with you. So
Sure.
let's start with the strength and conditioning because that's the last thing we talked about when we were in a voice call together. Um, what? There are a lot of misconceptions. There's a lot of misconceptions, and one of the misconceptions is, for example, that people think that they can't snack when they're,
Oh,
for example, trying to lose weight or cut. Why is that? Why do people have such a bad understanding of that?
mainly because people choose to look at food as an activity rather than as fuel for the body. If we look at how our ancestors treated food and hunger and managing, they didn't manage their weight. They just tried to pack in as many calories as they could. Well, that behavior has carried over to a time period now where we are always in abundance, and we have now catered our snacks and things like that to our taste, which is high in fat. That tastes good to us. And that tastes good to us because that's what allowed us to survive historically. Well, now that we have so much food that is high in fat content and tastes good to us, that's where people start putting on weight. So then they go to lose the weight, and they're still surrounded by foods that are saturated in fat. And the basic math is that carbohydrates and protein are only 4 calories per gram, and fat is 9 calories per gram, so more than double the calories. When you go to choose a snack that's healthy, people immediately jump to like vegetables or something, right? Well, you can just as easily accomplish the same thing with peanuts. It's just a much smaller portion.
Hmm.
So really, what it comes down to is understanding how many calories and what kind of calories are in the foods that you're snacking on. Obviously, fresh vegetables and things like that are going to fill you up because you can eat so much more of them. But yeah, when people choose their snacks, they often choose snacks that are high in fat, and they may not even realize it, and then therefore they get extra calories.
Yeah, I'm a sucker for that. When I look at the packaging or like when I look at the back of snacks, the first and probably only thing I look at is the amount of calories per 100 grams or per package. While in reality, what you're saying is it matters what kind of calories, where it comes from, protein, the
That's
carbs,
right.
the fats, the sugar.
That's right. Yeah. So fat is the most easily digested and converted energy source, and your body will use that first. The very next thing your body will use as energy is carbohydrates. Now, it takes it a longer time to do so, and your body has to work harder for it. And it will use that after it's consumed all of the fat that's available. Protein is used as a replenishing tool. Protein is the building blocks of everything in your body. So whether that's, muscles or cell regeneration, everything, it comes from protein. There's a lot of different ways that you can approach your diet depending on what your goals are.
Okay. So let me get this straight. When I, for example, eat something with high carbs, and a good example of that would be, for example, pasta that's high in carbs.
Mhm.
Is that a good source of food to eat after a workout or before a workout because it releases slowly, you said the energy.
So it's also going to depend on the activity that you're partaking in. So let's say that you're going to run 8 miles tomorrow.
Hmm.
Then you want to have a big bowl of pasta tonight. Because by the
Oh,
time that's metabolized, your body has got that energy source ready to use for that 8 mile run. Now, if you're going to run 8 miles and then you know you're going to run 5 miles the next day, right after your run, you want to take in some protein and you want to take in some more carbohydrates and then probably even more carbohydrates the night before you run 5 miles.
so if I, for example, have a high percentage of fat in my body and I
Mhm.
want to um, lose weight, what I don't want to do is reach my daily calorie limit with carbs and then, no, wait, I'm saying this wrong. So you said that your body chooses to burn fat first. But can't I
Yeah,
replenish my energy with fatty foods instead of carbs?
no, no.
Okay.
And the reason for that is so fat again is used first. It's also used quickly.
Hmm.
It also does not satiate you very well unless you take in so much fat that it's being counterproductive to what you're trying to accomplish. The misconception here is that a lot of people say carbs are bad. Just cut out carbs and you're good to go. It's like, okay, you can do that and you will drop the calories. You're not going to feel great and you're not going to be able to perform very long. Moreover, whenever you do start taking in carbs again, you will almost certainly start stacking on the weight again. Carbs should make up roughly about 40% of the calories you take in every day.
Oh wow, that's a lot.
It is a lot. Um, and it's actually not that hard to do.
Hmm.
The problem is finding carbohydrates that are not high in fat. Now, they do exist. They exist in things like they exist naturally, like in sweet potatoes. They exist in high grains, so your brown rice, oatmeal, quinoa, things like that. So they are available.
Hmm.
You may not necessarily enjoy the food, but you learn how to season it and you learn how to cook with it, and you can actually balance it out pretty quick. And again, so a lot of here's the other misconception is that people think of diet as a temporary thing rather than a lifestyle change. So your diet can include um, just about anything you like as long as it's in the proper proportion.
Yeah,
And then you may have to supplement with something else.
yeah, the problem what a lot of people do, especially after like it's what is it, January 17th, 18th. 2 weeks ago was New Year's Eve. 3 weeks ago was New Year's Eve. And with New Year's comes New Year's resolutions. And you could instantly see that in the gym. The gym was packed. And which I do support that. I do want people to be more healthy. I'm trying to be more healthy. I am not healthy right now, but I try. What one thing I knew beforehand because I tried it multiple times before was you can't make big lifestyle changes and stick to it. You can. There are exceptions to the rule, but making big lifestyle changes, it's going to be very temporary. You want to make small adjustments along the way. Um, One of the things, for example, that I started doing was I started drinking more water. But instead of the first mistake I made was I bought a big jug of 2 liters, filled up with water, put it on my desk, and I never touched it. It just didn't work. What did work was I kept nothing around me. I don't drink tap water. I kept nothing around me, just a glass. And that glass is just water. And I just drank the water. And every time I needed something more, I just went downstairs, got into the kitchen, used some more. Um, I assume the same thing is with diets, because mm, when
Let me build
you,
an analogy that you can understand.
I'm sorry.
You're a Rocket League. I said, let me build an analogy that you can understand.
Hmm.
You're a Rocket League coach.
Right.
Let's say that you have a gold 3 player that comes to you and pays for your coaching and says, I want to be grand champ. Well, you can tell him you can get there, It's not going to happen in 2 months, right? You
No.
have to set small, achievable goals to get to that point. So let's start with, how about platinum? Let's get you to platinum 2 in a month. Can we do that? Sure, that's manageable, and you could probably coach them into doing that. It's the same thing with achieving your fitness goals, whether that's losing weight, adding muscle mass, or even performance when it comes to adding strength or endurance.
Hmm.
It's very similar.
Right. What I find interesting is that over, let's say, let's take protein as an example. There's always this rule that if you want to put on muscle mass, that you need to take like 1.4 times your body weight or 1.6 times your body weight. But what I don't understand about it is, it's like, where am I supposed to get all that protein from? Because it's a ridiculous amount. Like, I'm not the
Yes.
smallest and I'm not the biggest. But for example, I was talking to a couple of friends when they try to help me out with my gym goals, so to say, fitness goals. I was supposed to take 160 grams of protein, and especially nowadays, it's like I can't afford it. So to come completely back to what I was saying earlier with like reading the backs of the labels and stuff, is whatever I pick up has so much calories in it for the protein that it comes with. What's a like? How can I, like, I'm someone who sits behind the PC most of the day, unfortunately. How can I make sure that I get a regular, not regular, but a high protein diet without getting too much out of my comfort zone of lifestyle, for example? Like, what can I replace? Because I don't get it.
So, like, that's a very intricate personal question because I have no idea what your routine is like right now.
Hmm.
I don't know what you eat or how often you eat every day. I can tell you, like, sort of the way that I do it, like what my daily
Yeah,
meal
please.
plan is. So, like, I'll wake up in the morning and I'll have a 2 scoop protein shake with a bowl of oatmeal. So that'll give me 60 grams of protein first thing in the morning. I need about 185, 190 grams a day. Okay, so I've taken out about a third of that with just my morning meal. I get some good complex carbohydrates from the oatmeal. About 10 a.m., I start digging more into carbs. A couple pieces of fruit, things like that. Maybe some celery sticks, a little bit of peanut butter, something like that. By lunchtime, now I've got um, 3 chicken breasts is usually what I eat.
Every
That
day.
sounds like a lot. Just about every day. Yeah, I
Okay.
like to eat the same things every day, and I'm weird like that. But here's the difference, though, is I'll take the chicken and I'll prepare it in different ways.
Hmm.
So one day I may just bake the chicken and I will season it a certain way, and I'll just eat it as is. Other days I might shred the chicken and I'll use some steak sauce with it, almost kind of like a barbecue sauce. So I have this kind of pulled shredded chicken, right? But either way, it's the same thing. Steak sauce is one of those cheat sauces you can use almost as much as you want.
Yeah, I think I
The
saw
the
Ronnie
the
Coleman in one of
A1.
his videos. He had like six cases full of barbecue sauce, and it was just like pouring it over. I was like, damn, damn, that's a lot of sauce.
So then usually about 2 or 3 o'clock, I take in some more carbohydrates,
Hmm.
usually some fresh vegetables, piece of fruit. Dinner time, I'm taking in another 50 grams or so of protein, either by way of chicken or fish. Um, and that's pretty much it. Most of it is there's a lot of carbohydrates during my dinner meal. So like a couple of cups of brown rice usually is what I go for.
Hmm.
Um, so like to put it in terms of grams, it ends up being something like 350 grams of carbohydrates, 180 grams of protein, and around 55, 60 grams of fat every day.
That gets expensive though, man. Eating so much chicken every day. That
If
that
you want
has,
to, yeah. Now,
yeah.
the other way you could do it is you could substitute your 3 chicken breasts for another protein shake.
Okay.
Because, I mean, 60 grams of protein, 3 chicken breasts is about 60 grams of protein.
Hmm.
I prefer to add that in at least once a day because that is going to satiate you. You're not going to feel the hunger.
Right. Right.
So
You
like
can also
over here, a 10-pound bag of chicken breast, boneless, skinless chicken breast goes for about $10.
a
That'll
pound
last me
is how much
a
kilograms?
pound. A pound is about, it's a little less than half a kilogram.
Okay, it's about the same price then. Yeah.
It's really not that expensive because that bag of chicken will last me about a week.
Okay.
So if you're spending $10, 10 euros, whatever, for a week's worth of chicken, that's reasonable, I would
Hmm.
think.
Hmm. You can also
Um,
replace the chicken with, for example, beans and legumes and stuff, right? Because, for example, I love beans.
you can, but beans are not as high in protein as you think they are.
Okay.
They are high in protein for a grain, but just as a raw protein source, it's almost impossible to reach your goal without going over budget on your carbohydrates.
Right.
And that's not to say that you can't have beans. It's about balancing your nutrition and understanding your diet.
Hmm.
It actually involves a lot of simple math. And you can work it out. There's a couple of calculators you can use online, but the way that you actually do it is people need about 20 grams of fat every day just to survive. Without 20 grams of fat, you start getting very sluggish. A lot of your bodily functions start working. Your libido goes down. It's not really healthy.
Hmm.
And so some people do cut out too much fat. If you get in the range of about 40 to 60 grams of fat a day, that's a healthy low fat, is what we call that.
Okay.
Your protein, especially if you're a young male, and you're trying to either maintain muscle mass or gain muscle mass, you need as many grams of protein as you are pounds in weight. If you're using kilograms, it ends up being,
Almost double.
yeah, it's double in kilograms.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then for the rest of it is carbohydrates. So then the next question becomes, and this is just the way it naturally goes, okay, well, how many calories do I need? Well, again, it depends on what you're trying to accomplish.
Hmm.
It depends on how old you are. It depends on your height and your weight, your current weight, and your build. And then you make adjustments after that. So you may start with, say, somebody of your size, you probably start somewhere in the neighborhood of about 2,700 calories. Now we have to convert those calories into grams so that you know how to measure your food.
Right.
So if we say 2,700
Hmm.
and we know that you need about 180 grams of protein a day, well, 180 grams multiplied times 4 calories per gram, you end up with 700 and change calories. So we subtract that from your original 2,700. So
Okay.
now you have 2,000 calories that you make up in fat. 50 grams of fat times 9 calories per gram, 450. So now you've got about 1,500 calories worth of carbohydrates that you have to eat every day.
Mhm.
And that's how you do it. And then what happens is you start weighing yourself once a week. You weigh yourself once a day, it's not going to matter. Your weight's going to fluctuate up or down 5 pounds given your water intake and different various things. So it's actually a long trend that you have to look at. Whenever I took on new clients as a strength and conditioning coach, I would not adjust their diet until 2 weeks showing the same trend.
Okay.
So if you weighed 190 pounds on Monday, the following Monday you weighed 191, and then the following Monday you weighed 194, now I'm adjusting your diet.
Because now you're gaining weight.
Right. And it's not much. You're basically just staying the same at 194. You're staying, okay, you're putting on a couple of pounds, but if we look at the trend, it's going up. It's the wrong direction. Now, what do we adjust? We can't adjust the fat. We need our 50 grams, and we don't want more than that. We cannot adjust our protein because we're right where we need it. So the difference comes up in your carbohydrates,
Right.
whether you're adding or subtracting. And that's
See
how
that
it's done.
it's funny because I did it completely ass backwards to how you're describing it. And maybe that's the difference between a professional and someone like I wouldn't even call myself an amateur. Because what I did was, for example, I got an app and I'm not being sponsored by them. It's Lifesum, and you can just track whatever you're eating. You can scan the barcode, and usually it's found there, and just put in the grams or the servings or whatever. Um, and it just automatically adds everything, shows your carbs, shows your fat, shows your protein of that meal, and total at the end of the day. And that's how I did it. So I would eat something, be like, okay, what do I have left over? Okay, I can squeeze in this. But what I'm doing then is I'm trying to squeeze stuff in rather than planning the whole day out. I mean, like, okay, this is what it will be. Okay, well, I don't feel very hungry right now, but in 2 hours I'll feel hungry. So instead of having lunch at noon, I'll have it at 2, the way you say
Right.
it, and that makes more sense. It's just a lot easier to manage. I got a question though. I think I asked this before, but I don't remember the answer. And it's low energy, whether that's after the gym or right now. Like I'm drinking a Red Bull, which is really not what you should do, but hey, um, I'm low energy. I've had a really good night's sleep. I've had breakfast. I've had a cup of coffee, and I still feel low energy. Nutrition wise, like food wise, if we look at it just like that, what is one of the main reasons why people feel low energy? Is it the carbs? Is it too much sugar?
So one of the main causes of low energy, one is a lack of activity on a regular basis. But the other thing is they're not replenishing the energy that they do expend with the right food. So almost certainly high carbohydrates, like high complex carbs, are what people need in order to feel normal. And
What
what's
are
funny is,
what are high complex carbs and what are the others? I don't know the difference.
okay, so an example of a simple carb would be anything with sugar.
Okay.
Sugar is a very simple carb, easily broken down, converted to energy, almost like fat. It's used a little bit differently, but it accomplishes the same thing as fat almost. And that's a simple sugar. Now here's why it matters. As your body metabolizes things like simple sugars, it doesn't have to expend as much energy to convert that sugar into energy that you can use. When you take a complex carbohydrate, your body actually spends calories to process that food. It takes your body longer to metabolize it, and you can use that energy throughout the day rather than in the next 20 minutes.
That makes sense because okay, now I get it why the people at the gym or friends that go to the gym go like, hey, if you're in the gym and halfway through you feel low energy, just eat a bar of chocolate.
Yeah.
It'll give you okay. Okay.
Now that works for your time of performance. A lot of endurance athletes, marathon runners and stuff, they actually buy this gel. It's basically just like sugar,
Hmm.
you know, and they'll just drink that while they're halfway through their marathon. And that gives them that energy to keep performing in the moment. If you're talking about just everyday, low energy, whether that's at 2 p.m. or 10 a.m., whatever the case, complex carbohydrates the day before is going to set you up for energy the next day.
Uh-huh. Okay, well that's good to know. And what were the
Um,
examples of high complex carbs?
so your whole grains,
Mm-hmm.
so brown rice,
Mm-hmm.
beans are good. Legumes, you had mentioned those earlier. That's a good complex carb. Quinoa is a fantastic superfood. It actually comes with some protein also, even more protein than beans. Um, yeah, I mean, if you can think of I mean, like for real, 9 grain bread is a good complex carb. Sweet potatoes,
Mm-hmm.
good complex carb. I mean, and there's references you can use online to find your complex carbs, but it's going to be things along those lines.
Okay, that's very interesting. That's good to know. So with simple carbs, would that also include regular white rice and regular pasta that you just boil with a little bit of salt water? Is that the same or is that a little
So
bit different?
they're a little bit different. They're not necessarily simple carbs for white. Like I would rather you have white rice than I would you have white bread,
Yeah.
for example.
Okay.
You eat a piece of white bread, you may as well be eating a piece of cake for all it does for you. Seriously, that's how easily it's converted from what it is to energy. It's just like eating sugar.
Okay.
But again, like 9 grain bread, 9 grain whole wheat bread is a different story. So the choices you make in what kind of bread you have to buy will make big differences.
It's actually relatively pretty simple. It's just
Mhm.
we don't get taught how it all works, which is weird. It's
But we
really
all,
weird.
I think, inherently understand how to move our weight in a very general sense.
Hmm.
We don't all understand how to plan for it. We also
No,
don't plan how to maintain it.
no, I have no clue. Like I told you the story how I lost like 20, maybe 30 kilos. And that's just from the top of my head because I didn't do any measuring, any data writing, nothing. All I did was I just cut out the Coke, I just cut out the chips, I cut out all the sugar, and I just stopped eating that and just lost a lot of weight. But
Hmm.
the weight gain that I had was just purely me dodging into food because of this. I guess now afterhand It was just stress and maybe even depression to a certain degree because of all the stuff that I went through personally with the loss of my dad and stuff and taking care of him. But
Sure.
at one point, I really got scared because I looked in the mirror. I was like, dude, I don't know who you are. Who the fuck are you in the mirror? Like, I've never packed a waistband. Like, a what love handles. I never packed them. I never had. I was a very active kid, very active in my teenage years, and very active until a couple of years ago. So to see that was really shocking. I was like, okay, we're done. Like, we're gonna cut all this crap out, and then we'll see where it goes. In 2.5 months, I lost a substantial amount of weight. Luckily, no one really saw it because I was always wearing hoodies. I was like, cool. The only person that saw was my fiance, but that's fine.
But whenever you drop all that weight, then you start wearing tight t-shirts and you're kind of proud of the way you look
Yeah,
and like
yeah.
it's different. You don't try to hide it quite as much.
No, and I've always been proud of my physique. It's not that I ever was like a huge bodybuilder or super lean or whatever, but I was like, hey, I got a good physique. I got good structure. I got my dad's physique, and he was always pretty stocky looking. And I always like wearing t-shirts. I don't like hiding myself. I don't like doing anything for others. If I feel comfortable, I'm gonna do it within reason,
Yeah.
obviously. But to get this information from you is amazing. There's also this other thing that a couple of my friends have told me, and I'm in between writing things down for people watching this with the video on. Um, is it true that cardio isn't really good if you're focusing on muscle mass gain?
So it's kind of a double-edged sword.
Okay.
You almost always want to do some form of cardio, but there are different kinds of cardio. So a lot of people think of cardio and they think you have to do intense cardio in order for it to be effective.
Yeah, that's what
And
I think, for example.
that's not the truth at all.
Oh, okay.
It's not the truth. No, if you get your heart rate hanging out between 130, 140 beats per minute, you can just sustain that for 20, 30 minutes while you're bulking. Totally fine.
Okay.
But that's good for your heart health. That's good for blood flow. That's good for so many things. And you should do it. Maybe not as often as if when you're cutting. And when you're cutting, you want to change. That's when you want to go to high intensity cardio. But there's absolutely no reason that you couldn't, go for a bike ride or a jog 2, 3 times a week while you're bulking.
Because the way I, for example, look at it, which I assume is a very old school way of looking at it, is if you don't break sweat, you're not cutting, or you're not burning calories.
There
That's
is
what.
some truth to that.
Okay.
There is truth to it. So when you do cardio, you do burn calories. You simply account for that.
hmm
You take in more carbohydrates to make up for that cardio. It's a really bad idea to completely cut out cardio at any time in your life. Most importantly, because it's hard to get it back, especially
Yeah.
as you get older.
Yeah.
But you lose it so fast. But it also affects your cardiovascular health. So your heart starts to get weaker. Your blood vessels start to not. They may or may not dilate depending on what's going on. But your overall health, I'm not going to say it's dependent on your cardio exercise, but it's certainly enhanced by it.
hmm Okay.
So, like,
So.
if you know that you're going to be doing cardio 3 times a week and you burn, I don't know, 200 calories during a cardio session, you simply take in 200 calories worth more of carbohydrates.
hmm So
That's all it is.
what did you mean with, like, there are different types of cardios for different things? Like, for
Depending on
example.
what your goals are.
Okay.
Okay, so if you're just trying to get generally more healthy, jogging, totally fine. Go jog for half an hour. You don't have to cover a specific distance. You don't have to go a specific pace. You want to monitor your heart rate. That's the metric you want to go with. If you are training for a 5K,
hmm
well, that's when you start with your heart rate, but then you can actually change the way you exercise to, excuse me, you can change your exercise to prepare for that 5K. And so you'll have days where you have, a long run, right? So like on Monday, you would do a 10K at whatever pace. It'd be slow. Tuesday, you'll do something along the lines of wind sprints, maybe like 8 of them, right? So you'll run for a minute, you'll jog for a minute, and then when I say run, I mean like dead sprint, sucking air at the end of it.
Okay.
Wednesday, you'll cross train, get on an elliptical or a bike. Thursday, you'll do something called Baylor halves. Have you ever heard of that?
I've never heard of that. No.
That is a fantastic exercise for your cardio. It makes you both faster and builds endurance, and it's extraordinarily painful.
Okay. Okay.
In from a training standpoint, it is. So you're going to run half a mile. You can find this on any quarter mile track. So what the way you do it is you run a quarter mile plus another half of the track. So it ends up being 3/8 of a mile.
Hmm.
3/8 of a mile, a little bit faster than just your whatever pace you can hold almost indefinitely.
Okay.
And then that last eighth mile, you're going to sprint.
Damn.
You do that 5, 6 times, and that's your training session.
Damn.
It's called Baylor Halves. And then Friday, another long run, 10K. You take Saturday, cross train, and then you take Sunday off. That's what I would recommend to anybody that's, an endurance athlete in training.
Hmm.
So, but again, this all changes depending on what your athletic goals are. So it's tailored specifically to what you're trying to achieve.
I always love it when you go on YouTube and you're trying to, learn a couple of things, and every YouTuber tells like, just do this, just go to the gym, guys, and get on the bicycle, and just put in 10 kilometers at the end of your workout. It's like, really, it's not that. I don't believe you. It cannot be that easy. It depends, like you said, on what you want to achieve and what you want to do. I refuse to
If it
believe
was
that.
that easy, everybody would do it.
Exactly.
If your goal is to just lose body fat percentage, yeah, you can do just that, and you can fix it with your diet. It actually doesn't really matter what you do.
Hmm.
It actually just comes down to what you eat.
Yeah.
That's going to change your body fat percentage. If you're
Because
actually training for performance in something, like actively gaining strength or actively gaining speed, that's when your activities matter.
right, because for example, this is something that I've noticed myself is that weight loss or physique changes start in the kitchen. That's number one. There, I don't think
They
anyone
start and
would.
end in the kitchen.
Yeah, no one can dispute that. It's hard evidence. Everyone does it. It's a fact. Well, one thing also is that most people don't realize. For example, most people, well, not most, some people have decent diets. It's pretty good. It's pretty normal, quotation marks, but they just don't move at all. And if they implement a little bit of activity in there, so for example, if they go to the gym and they lift a bunch of weights and they get on the bicycle for like 20 minutes, that's enough for them to start losing weight. And a lot of people are just not aware of that, which is a shame, I think.
So when you say a normal diet, I think all that you're actually talking about is they consume a number of calories that allows them to maintain their weight.
By normal diet, I mean a person who has. How do I define normal? Normal is such a subjective term, isn't it?
Well, in a
Yes,
way.
to 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 a certain extent to maintain their current weight, but also, for example, me on Fridays or on Saturdays, I turn into an animal, and that's just my like 2 evenings of cheating. That's what I do.
Hmm.
I'll buy a bunch of snacks, and I'll be like, okay, on Friday I'm having this because I like it, and on Saturday I'll have this because I like it, and that's where I indulge in everything. And for the remaining of the week, I'll try to stick within the boundaries. But what other people would do or do, which I would consider normal, is they'll buy snacks, for example, when they're going for grocery shopping on a Monday or on a Saturday. And they're like, you know what? I bought a bag of chips for this week and I'm going to split it over the entire week. And every evening I'm going to have a little bit. That's what I would call normal. Me, I'm an animal. I need to empty the whole bag. I just need to finish it all.
Okay. So they consume their calories in a way that allows them to maintain their body weight. And that's really all it comes down to. How they do that doesn't really matter. Like you could have the whole bag of chips
Hmm.
and you could plan for that and you could account for that on your so-called cheat days. Right. And you could adjust your caloric intake based on that. Like I know on Saturday I'm gonna have a whole family sized bag of Doritos. I'm gonna do it. Okay. Well, I have to make up the calories somewhere, so I have to take in fewer carbs in the evening. No problem. I still get to eat what I want and be happy, one meal a day
Yeah.
or one meal a week or one meal every month, whatever. And then you're not completely blowing yourself out for the whole week, you know.
What I
When it comes to managing your weight, you are doing one of three things. You're either gaining, losing, or maintaining.
Mhm.
And you can't. abstain from that. You're
Okay.
always doing one of those things.
Yeah.
So, how you eat is going to determine which of those you're doing.
Um, I've heard a lot of different things about this, and it's that's why it kind of surprised me when you said, "Oh, when you eat high complex carbs on the day before, like for example in the evening, it's fuel for the next day." Because when I was a kid, for example, and I'm sure you've been told this as well as a kid, because we're around the same age, is you don't eat a couple hours before you go to bed because it'll just miraculously magic turn into fat, and that's just how it is. However, how does that work with, for example, protein? When I bought my protein, the packaging said make sure to take your protein 2 hours before, 2 hours after your workout. But now other friends are telling me like, dude, it doesn't matter. It's about, throughout the day because the proteins and the carbs and the fat and the whatever, you just carry that over to the next day. Is that to how much extent is that true?
I think some of what you're saying comes from people that are talking to you out of ignorance.
Hmm.
They don't understand the way protein is metabolized.
And
So,
just a follow-up question before you explain. There's also something I found out. I haven't looked into it yet. It's called protein synthesis, which is done by
mhm,
with magnesium. Can you explain that to me too? Because I don't understand how the first thing that I said works, and also don't work how the protein synthesis works. If you know
okay,
anything about that.
sure. Okay, so first things first, protein in its metabolism, I like analogies, right?
Hmm.
People understand analogies better. If we think of your muscles as a wall that needs to be built higher, we can think of protein as the bricks that build the wall, or that are the wall. And your metabolism acts as the laborer that's going to build the bricks. Okay.
Okay.
First thing you have to have is the material to build the wall. That's your protein. And you want it as fast as possible, like within half an hour of your workout ending.
Okay.
Your body immediately takes that protein and starts repairing and rebuilding. When you go to sleep, your laborer slows down. That's all that means.
Hmm.
Any food that you take in, even 10 minutes before you fall asleep, it will be used. It's just going to be used at a slower rate until you wake up and start moving. As you sleep, your heart rate lowers. You're not consuming any energy. It's very efficient when it comes to the use of the calories that you do have. Um, but in terms of, oh, well, it just turns into fat. Well, no, it doesn't. You're just not using the energy.
Okay. Yeah. It's funny growing up because when you reach your 20s or early 20s, you start reading more, you start finding out more, especially in this day and age and day of information. You find things and you're like, God damn it, my fucking parents lied to me. I can't believe. And then you grow even further. You're like, they tried their best, they just didn't know any better. So you're just like,
Yeah.
you can't hold them accountable. But that's
Well,
actually
I
sorry,
think that
go on.
there's a misconception about how fat is put on the body also. All it is, and it's not a combination of carbs and fat mixed together and it forms a fat cell and it sticks to your body. It doesn't work like that. Your body stores fat. I mean, it pulls it from fat that you intake, but the reason it stores it is because you took in too many calories to begin with.
Hmm.
If you took in too many calories, your body says, I have an excess. I might need it later. I'm storing the fat. That's all that is. If you're taking in a number of calories where you're actually losing weight, the reason you're losing weight is because your body is burning the fat that's on your body. That's how that happens. And people have this other misconception where, well, your body burns muscle first. No, your body doesn't store fat to burn muscle. That's stupid. Like, who told you that? There's a reason your body stores fat. It's so it can use it as a fuel source after the fact. Will you lose muscle mass? Yes, if you don't take in enough protein. But
Okay.
if you're taking in your 180 grams of protein a day, you will maintain most of your muscle mass while losing the fat if you're in a caloric deficit. Any doctor in the world will tell you if you're in a caloric deficit, that's the way you lose weight.
Hmm.
Pure and simple. How you get there, whether it's low carb, low fat, doesn't matter. It adds up to the same thing. You have to take in less calories than you burn,
Right.
or take in less calories than you consume.
And then when you reach your goal, you switch your diet or your activities to maintain rather than a constant deficit, correct?
Exactly, exactly. And you have to do that. You have to stay in that maintenance phase for about 2 months for your body to adjust and for you to now feel, you kind of feel it out, what it feels like to be satiated.
Okay.
So when you lose all this weight, let's say that you're, I don't know, 100 kilos,
Hmm.
right? And you want to go to 80 kilos. When you get to 80 kilos, now you have to maintain 80 kilos for 2 months. Actively count your calories, actively count your grams for 2 months. You're not done with the diet just because you reached your target weight. You have to actively stay there and still weigh yourself once a week and still make your adjustments on your carbohydrates for about 2 months. After those 2 months are up, now you feel it. You don't go, okay, now the 2 months are up and I'm just going to go eat a whole pizza and then, like do whatever I want, 4 donuts, whatever. Now it's like, okay, I'm hungry. Well, what do I want to eat? Well, now you've had so much time with your diet to lose the weight and maintain the weight. You know what a good portion is for you.
Right.
So, okay, I think I'll have some oatmeal, a little bit of cinnamon, whatever, whatever the case is. And you know what's good for you, you know what's bad for you, and you just eat to maintain naturally. You don't have to count anymore. You know what's good.
I thought that the whole story about taking your protein 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes after your workout was complete bullshit.
No, no, your
No?
body will use it instantly.
Oh shit. So me coming
Instantly.
home, sitting down for 20 minutes, taking a shower, coming back, hour passes by. That's not a very smart thing to do then.
No, no. So here's the way that you should do it. You should space your protein out throughout the day, though,
Okay.
because your body can only use so much at a given time.
Mm-hmm.
You need to spread it out throughout the day. If you go home after the gym and slug 180 grams worth of protein shakes, which would be miserable, but let's say that you decide to do that, you won't use it all. You know,
And make sure to set up a camera for YouTube.
you probably will throw up. That's like a gallon of protein powder. It's crazy. But no, like, so you want some protein in the morning, you want some at midday, you want some in the evening, spread it out, 3, 4 times a day.
Hmm.
But so if we think about it in terms of, let's go back to our analogy of the wall and the laborer. Your body is now amped up, right? Right after you get done with the workout, your metabolism is higher because it's consumed so many calories from you exercising. You've got a laborer there waiting. Where's my bricks?
Right.
If you don't have any bricks, you can't build the wall.
And in the same analogy, would the magnesium then be the mortar for the bricks?
The magnesium would be the truck that delivers the bricks. But
Got.
it's not just magnesium.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay.
It's not just magnesium. You want BCAAs.
Right.
They're amino acids. That's going to be protein synthesis. BCAAs, you're going to find them in everyday foods, but you can take it as a supplement just to ensure, especially if you're following a rather extreme diet, like always protein powder and always carbohydrate drink mix, things like that. Then yeah, you need supplements to help out with that.
Okay.
Um, Most of your BCAAs are going to be found in organic foods, though. There's no reason that you have to take BCAAs. It is going to help if you decide to, though.
Right. And with protein and BCAAs, um, if you take too much, you just excrete that, right? With like urine or shit.
Well, with BCAAs, yes. With protein, you probably won't. I mean, like, you can't take in too much unless you just take in too much in a given time block.
Right. Okay.
You'll also notice when you're in a caloric deficit, you will not defecate as much.
Mm-hmm.
Not nearly as much, if at all. I
Yeah.
mean, well, okay, you will a little, but what I'm saying is, if this is kind of gross, but if you notice that you're defecating a lot, or even couple times a day, 3 times a day, something like that, you're taking in way too much food, way
Yeah,
too much.
yeah.
Because all that is your body saying, this is all extra. I don't need it.
Hmm.
At that point, your body has already not only given you the energy that you need, but it's already stored the fat.
Like it's reached the capacity of being able to store X amount of fat, and even on top of that, it's like, bro, enough. Like, get it away.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
Huh. Interesting. So how does that work in the army? How strict is the food there? Because they definitely care about the nutrients and stuff that the soldiers get.
Well, sort of. Like it's a very controlled environment through your initial entry training. So your basic training and your first job training, everything's very controlled.
Hmm.
So you eat when you're told to eat, where you're told to eat, and what's on the menu is what's on the menu, and that's it.
You know what I find interesting about soldiers or Marines or Air Force is when they get out of the army, for example. Let's take you for example. They're very free people. Very.
Hmm.
They don't really like being told what to do. But then you look back at their career or their service, and you're like, but everything was told. Everyone like they told you what to do, when to do, and how to do it. How does that how does that work? Why is that? Is it the authority that they have? Is it the respect that you have for the ranks and the army?
What do you mean? So which part
So
are you asking about?
so what I'm trying to say is it is you're a very free person. You like going wherever you want, standing wherever you want, eating whatever you want to a certain degree. But when you're in the army, that doesn't seem the case. And the key word here is seem. Because like you said, you're told when to eat, you're told what to eat, you're told where to go. But as soon as the service is over, you guys are very, and by you guys I mean this by every country, by the way. It's a very, I can't find the right words for it, but it's like very free, like leave me alone type of attitude. A lot of freedom. Just don't tell me what to do. Leave me alone. I'll find out. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I got you. Well, so in a lot of regards, the military, once you get past your initial entry training, the military is a lot like a lot of civilian jobs in some ways.
Hmm.
Aside from it being, a regular 12-hour day almost every day between PT and doing your job. Um, once you reach the rank of sergeant or E5, you don't have to live in the barracks anymore if you don't want to.
Hmm.
So you can have your own space. You get 30 days of leave, and that is controlled a bit. You have to submit a form to your commander and everything, like, hey, I want to take 2 weeks and go to North Carolina or whatever, go see my mom. And, but you treat it like a vacation, just like anybody else would.
Hmm.
Um, but your day-to-day activities are not that much unlike a civilian job. I suppose the attitude around it is, yeah, you fall within a certain hierarchy,
Hmm.
and so you are told what to do, when to do it, and at the drop of a hat, you could be loaded up on a bus and taken to a plane to go somewhere.
Hmm.
When you become a civilian, the pace changes.
Is it slower or faster?
Slower. It's a lot slower.
Okay, that's interesting.
A lot slower. Well, so you go from, okay, well, I need to go be at PT every morning at 5 a.m., and I'm not going to be done with the day until 5 p.m. or later in some cases, to now you're a civilian. You get to pick what to do, when to do it. Do I wake up at 5 in PT? Well, in my particular case, I do, but not everybody does. And, maybe they get a job where they're working overnights instead, so their schedule completely changes. W- I
I,
and I don't know.
you you you
It's
kind of
more than
answered my
just
question. You kind of did answer my question because it's more. Again, I can't put it in words, but I kind of get it. It's what everyone else has in as you would call civilians with a regular job. You don't think too much about it. You just do it.
yeah.
Interesting. Because when I was a kid, I always wanted to go. I wanted to become a commando, Maroon Beret. I think it is when you translate it to English, the Turkish Special Forces.
Hmm.
And
That'd be
I
like our Green Berets.
yeah, sort of similar. And it's very interesting because when I was young, I really wanted to become, you know, a commando, so to say, because my grandfather served in the army for 20 plus years. My dad didn't. He had mandatory conscription, but he did that for other political reasons in the 80s and 90s in Turkey. We
Hmm.
can come to that later if you want. Um, and for some reason, I didn't qualify. And it kind of died down with that. So I always had this little bit of interest. It's like, okay, but what if? Like, what if I did something else in the army or the navy or whatever? And it's like, hmm. So I'm always very interested to talk to like veterans or just active members of service. Um, so why did you decide to go to the army? Why did you decide to join?
When I was growing up, my my parents are divorced
Mhm.
since I was very young. I don't have a single memory of my parents being together, which is not that uncommon of a situation. But my father was not really around that much, and me and my mother to this day don't get along very well. We have very different views about things, and she's a very controlling person, and I don't consider her to be very logical.
Bro,
And
you
this is not just me being a teenager and trying to do what I want to do. This is okay. I don't know how to support you, mom, if you don't tell me what the fuck is going on.
bro, everything you just described about your mother, I recognize 110%. Exactly.
So I wanted to get away from there.
Mhm.
We also didn't have a lot of money. I thought I wanted to go to college to become an engineer. And so the military in the US offers tuition assistance.
Mhm.
So that was my way to pay for college. It was my way to immediately move away from my home, away from my mother, do some growing up, and it's also a job. So I initially signed
How
on for
old
a
were you?
6-year contract. I was 19 when I joined the
19.
army.
Okay.
Hmm. So I joined the army. I go through that, and when I'm still 19, actually, I took my first leave. I took 1 week of leave between my initial entry training and my first duty station. When I was home during that week, I'll never forget this. 19 years old, I'm now an active member of the military, and so I'm home for like 2 days. And on the third day, I wake up, get something to eat, and I'm kind of just, chilling out on the couch after such intense training for, a few months. And my mom comes in and she's like, "You didn't make your bed." I was like, no, I didn't. She's like, "Okay, well, you're grounded." I was like, "Are you being serious right now?" She's like, "Yeah, I'm serious." I was like, "I'm not grounded. That's not going to happen." It's like, "Oh no, you're grounded. You can't go anywhere. You can't do anything." I was like, "Fucking watch me." And I got up and left.
Wow. See, it's funny now, but during that moment, it must have been very intense, like especially emotionally wise.
I was livid. I
Yeah.
was like, "Who the fuck do you think you are? I don't need you anymore." Like, not
Wow.
like that.
And that
I
was
don't, I don't
it.
mean that in a bad way.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
but like, I'm not a kid, you know?
Well, I mean, there's plenty 20-odd-year-olds that are like very childish still. Age doesn't say
Well,
how grown up you are, unfortunately.
true, but given the circumstances and where I was at in my life, that wasn't the correct response.
Right.
You don't talk to another adult that way.
No.
She did not understand the boundary of how our relationship had evolved. We went from me being her dependent to me being not necessarily her equal, but me being on the same playing field as her in terms of where we were in life.
Hmm.
And I had younger siblings that were still around, so I understand how she could fall into that. And I tried to check her. She didn't have it. She's like, "Oh no, I'm mom and I'm boss and this is the way it is." And it's like, "Well, fine. I don't have to be here then. Like, I can go somewhere. I came here because I wanted to see you,
Right.
you know?"
So that was it, and then you went back to the army the next day.
I actually went and visited a friend of mine that lived across town, and I stayed there for a few days.
Okay.
I could have gone back to, my duty station early if I wanted to, but I had a few days of leave, so that's what I did.
Just enjoy them. Right.
Yeah,
So
just take my days off.
how long did you serve in army? Was 7 years?
7 years, yeah. So I initially did a 6, and then I was looking at reenlisting. I was unsure about it though, The
Hmm.
politics of the military were changing heavily at that time.
And this is which time? Which year?
So I served from 2007 to 2014.
2007, 2014. Okay.
So right around 2013, this is like right around the beginning of like woke culture.
Right.
It's
And
it wasn't called that then, but that's kind of what it was.
this is the Obama administration in that time, right? 2006 to 2014 was
2000
Obama?
so 2008 to 2016 was Obama.
Okay, so yeah, right in the middle of the Obama administration then.
Hmm. And one of the things that really turned me off was the fact that females were being allowed into combat arms. And I feel like that needs some explanation. It's not that I'm against females being in combat arms if they can meet the standard. Totally fine, totally cool with that. I've always been sort of a bigger guy. Even in the army, I was 210 pounds.
Hmm.
Can she drag my ass out of a firefight?
Right.
If she can do that, I'm all for it.
Hmm.
I'm good with it. But here's what I really disagreed with. It wasn't so much that they were there. It was the way they implemented the females into combat arms unit. They didn't bring a young private E2, E3 into the unit and let them grow through that job and understand the job and then become an NCO and understand how to lead these soldiers and how to do that job. They brought them in as an E6, E7, somebody that's already in charge and doesn't know what the fuck they're doing in that job.
Oh, that's risky.
It's not only risky, it makes them incompetent leaders.
Right. I've also heard, and this is just hearsay because first of all, I don't live in America, so and I don't know how the regulations and stuff change. But I've heard that for what was the correct terminology that you used for enlisted soldiers? Was it
That's what it is.
CAU? CUA? You said something with CUA. Combat active, combat ready,
Combat arms. So
combat.
no, combat arms is different. So combat arms refers to a specific class of job in the military.
Okay, but what I was trying to say was like the requirements for women to be able to join. The requirements were lowered. Is that correct? Instead of matching you, for example. So let's say you have to go through the test, and I don't know the test, so I'm just gonna make one up. You have to be able to drag 200 pounds across the floor for 100 meters. But for a woman, it would be 100 pounds for 50 meters. Is that true, or is that complete bullshit?
That is true, but and that's not specific to combat arms though.
Oh, okay,
That's actually just straight across the board.
okay,
So you have a PT test, or at least when I was in, there was a PT test. Now they do something completely different. But at the time, it was push-ups, sit-ups, and a 2 mile run. And so you had to perform X number of push-ups in 2 minutes, X number of sit-ups in 2 minutes, and you had to run 2 miles in X amount of time or lower. My X is here, and the female X in the same age bracket is here.
okay. Hmm.
It's not standardized. It's subjective to your gender.
Okay.
I don't agree with that. I don't like it. That means now you are, if you want us to be the same, make us the same. Set the same standard. That doesn't mean lower my bar. It means raise theirs.
Right. Because it's about performance at the end of the day. It's about life and death, literally.
Yes,
Right.
exactly.
It makes sense. It makes sense that you would disagree with that. Look, I've never been a soldier. I don't plan on being one. And I hope in the future I don't have to be one either. Um, so I've always, to a certain extent, I've always opposed authority, but to a certain degree, I've respected authority,
Sure.
whether that's military or police or teachers, whatever. But I wouldn't want someone who is mm, risking their life, so to say, to deal with unnecessary risks or unnecessary, what's the right word? Responsibilities, I guess.
Liability.
Liability, that's the word. Liabilities. It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. Well, and I want to be very clear about what I was trying to say.
Yeah, please.
So it's not that I disagree with females being in combat arms or that I disagree with, them being able to be in the military at all. What I had a problem with was, regardless of gender, if you're thrown into a leadership position and you never had to do the grunt work, how are you going to lead those people in that?
Right.
I don't care if you're male, female, it doesn't matter.
Right.
If you don't know how to do the job, you don't know how to do the job, and therefore you can't supervise the job.
I agree.
And that's exactly what they were throwing these women into. is a leadership position in a job they don't know how to do, and now they're surrounded by people that know they can't do the job, and that respect factor goes way down
And just so
because it's
everyone
like,
understands, like even if the genders were reversed, I assume you would say the exact same thing,
yeah, see, then that's what I'm saying is it doesn't matter what gender you are. If you don't know the job, you don't know the job.
right? And that was the main reason you were like, you know what, I'm out.
Yeah, I extended for a year, kind of seeing how it would play out. It didn't work.
Hmm.
It wasn't working. Things got they just were not efficient. In hindsight, had I stuck around through the weird times there, I would have started to see some of the younger females come up, and I would have seen them come to fruition. I was never around for that part though. It was like this is bullshit. My job just got like 6 times harder because the leader doesn't know what the fuck they're talking about.
What what rank were you in the army?
So I made it to staff sergeant,
Staff
E6.
sergeant, E6.
Hmm.
Okay. And I assume your salary gets changed obviously with the higher the rank, the more you get paid.
Yep. So the higher your rank and the longer you're in the military,
Hmm.
the scale goes up.
Is there also an option for individuals to choose to remain the same rank and not go up?
Oh, certainly. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting.
If you didn't want to be promoted, that's fine. The, there are cases where if you choose not to accept a promotion, like 2 or 3 times, they'll just kick you out.
Oh.
So it's one thing if you're not eligible for it for one reason or another. You know, you fail the board or um, they just have more people than they need in that specific rank. It's another thing if you refuse the promotion because that's an active choice.
But
There's
why would
nothing
they
saying you have to excel in the military, but if you are selected to be promoted, it's almost expected for you to accept that.
Mhm. That's interesting. But why would they kick you out if you refuse to? If you're happy where you are and you do your job efficiently and effectively and you're good at it, what difference does it make?
Depending on the rank, like if you refuse to take, okay, so you have enlisted and officers, right?
Hmm.
Officers starting at Lieutenant O1, enlisted starting at E1, and it goes all the way to E9. When you reach E5 in the Army, you're now what they call an NCO, a non-commissioned officer. That officially makes you a leader of soldiers. You are now in a supervisory capacity. E1 through E4, you could stay at E4 your whole career and nobody cares. Once you reach E5, they expect you to progress, not quickly. They expect you to progress steadily at the appropriate rate from E5 to E6, E6 to E7.
Hmm.
And you may only stay at E7 the rest of your career or E8 the rest of your career. But if you're at E5 and you do well and they want to promote you to E6 and you say no thanks, they're probably only going to let you do that once or twice because you're taking up an NCO slot that somebody else could have.
Oh, gotcha.
You're disrupting the flow.
Gotcha. So you basically, if you were to, again, use an analogy, it's a well-oiled machine and you're basically becoming a clog in the machine.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, well, if you look at it from
And,
that
and
way.
they, I don't think that that's like a super common occurrence. It's just not. Most people are trying to reach that next rank.
Right.
But even if let's say you were happy at E5, right? You're like, I don't want to be in E6. That job's too political. Too many responsibilities. I don't think the military would have much of a problem with that by and large.
Hmm.
Where they would start to look at kicking you out is if you're an E5 and you cause problems. But like you cause just enough problems that it doesn't stop you from getting promoted, but they don't want to keep you either. They're almost looking for a reason to move you out of their unit, move you away from them. You know, when you
I'm a,
take a promotion above E4, you change duty stations.
oh,
So,
so
so like if I were going from E4 to E5, they don't want to keep me in the same unit because I was just peers with all these E4 and belows. We're on the same level. Now I become their boss. They don't want that, so they
yeah,
move you.
right. That makes sense. That makes sense. It's healthy because they're gonna turn around like, bro, last week we were having food next to each other, and now you're gonna tell me to do X, Y, Z, it's gonna rub.
Yeah.
Okay, understandable.
Well, and so then you'll change duty stations, and you do run into the same people at different duty stations as you change. So you might see that same person or a couple of people 3 years later, but you guys have changed in your roles so much in the military that you, on a personal level, you kind of pick up where you left off, but on a professional level, you start over.
That must
Like,
be
okay, where
hard.
did? where- In some ways, but in other ways, it's kind of nice. It's like, oh yeah, I remember. We were both NCOs together over at 142nd. It's like, okay, well now I'm your E6 and we're over here at 177th. Our jobs changed.
Right.
It doesn't affect us personally, but
Hmm.
yeah, how we operate and on our day-to-day activities changes.
Um, I've got so many questions. I don't know where to start. um, Fuck it. Let's start with the beginning. We can do millions of episodes if necessary.
Sure.
um, when you first joined the army, how much of a shock was it? Because were you like an active kid in your teenage years?
Yeah.
Were you, yeah? So it was
Yeah, I was
a
in
lot easier for
sports.
you.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, I was into sports. Actually, by the time I was a senior in high school, I had already read a couple of books about fitness, and bodybuilding and things like that. Um, so I mean, the culture shock was not as I'm gonna say it was there. It was not as prevalent as you would think.
Hmm.
But like I grew up, watching videos about military and people getting screamed at and having to do PT and stuff. So like that I expected. I was ready for that. I was not ready for the hours and hours of boredom.
Oh,
Something they don't tell you. It's
so
not very camera worthy.
can you give an example of like what is boredom? Like what is it? Is it that every day or?
No, not every day. I mean, in basic training, yeah, almost every day. You
Hmm.
get a level of boredom, and it's simply because you're trying to move 200 people through a training course, right? So if you go to the grenade range and there's only 6 lanes, you got to move 200 people through that. It takes all damn day, right? So you get all your gear on and you're all ready to go. You get out to the grenade range, you spend 30, 45 minutes on your lane. The rest of the time, you are sitting there watching everybody else throw grenades.
Wow. You can't just have a chit chat, I assume. You can't just
You
have a
can talk,
laugh.
yeah. I mean, yeah, like you can talk. I mean, as long as you're not being rambunctious and making a bunch of, yeah, you can sit there and chit chat.
Hmm.
The one thing you can't do is sleep. They won't let you
Yeah.
sleep.
Yeah, but I mean, how
But other
much
than
can you
that,
speak in like 6 hours? Like after 2, 3 hours, you're done. Like there's nothing to tell.
that's not true at all.
Really?
That is not true at all. No,
Hmm. Maybe I'm just a quiet
no.
person.
What's really interesting is when you remove all forms of media, neon lights, TVs, and all the noises of traffic, things get awfully quiet, and you start thinking, and you actually learn to think, and then you start sharing those thoughts with one another, and you start having revelations with one another, and you start sharing stories with one another, and then you start creating stories with one another. And this is actually where a lot of mythology comes from, I think, because this is what people did in 1,000 years ago.
Right.
You don't have the distraction of there's nothing to entertain you. You entertain yourself
Hmm.
as a group.
And one of the, for example, most well-known movies, Full Metal Jacket, is often proclaimed as, one of the better depictions of how the army is. And there was one thing that really struck me with it, and I can't quote it, but it was the I'm just gonna roughly try to explain it. It was basically when people sign up for the army, their mm, their individuality, their personality kind of gets taken away. Where the drill sergeant, he goes, "I don't care if you're white, brown, black. To me, you're all green. You're
Yeah.
all equal. You're all the same." Like it's very easy to see that in the movie. It's very easy to hear that from the movie. But in reality, how does that affect you? Does that make you more understanding? Does that make you a little bit annoyed as not being seen worthy in a certain type of way?
No,
No?
no, not at all. Not in that moment.
Right.
In that moment, and I think this is one of the very basic desires of humankind, especially, well, maybe not humankind, maybe as man, is to feel like you are both a contributor and a valued part of something greater than what you can accomplish on your own.
Hmm.
And whenever you strip your individuality of that and you are contributing to a large group effort, it is deeply satisfying. You don't want to stand out in that regard.
That's
Me,
interesting.
myself, by myself, I consider myself, a high speed, low drag individual. When I want to do something, I can apply myself and I try damn hard and I can make shit happen. So by myself, I'm okay. I'm all right. You put me together with a team of people just like me and we're fucking unstoppable. That's the way it is.
Right, right. There's this quote from a comedian that I follow around, Joey Coco Diaz, and he goes, "All you need is three motherfuckers, and you can conquer the world." And I believe in that. I believe in, you know, there's only so much you can do on your own,
Yeah. That's where I'm limited as an individual.
right?
And that's why I wasn't bothered by being one of the many green people.
It takes a lot of mm, self-reflection to realize that, though.
You weren't given a choice. If you tried to stand out during your initial entry training, you were you were called out for it.
I
You
wouldn't
were
do well
knocked
in the
down for
army.
it. A lot of people wouldn't. A lot
Yeah,
of people wouldn't.
maybe
A
I
lot of
don't
people
know.
that get in there figure it out that they're not meant for it.
Yeah, looking back, the way I turned out, maybe it's a good thing that I didn't pursue something else in the army or the navy or the air force. Maybe,
It's
maybe.
I, I don't know, man. A lot of people think, "Oh, I wouldn't do well with authority," or I wouldn't. Thing is, like, okay, you're a PT stud, right? Like, let's say you go there and you're the top 1% in physical fitness. They now expect that from you because you made yourself known for it. You puff out your chest and yeah, I can run 2 miles in 12 minutes.
Yeah, show
The
it.
next time you did a PT test and you run it in 14 minutes, like, what the fuck happened?
You were so
What's wrong
good.
with you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Okay.
it's not meant to knock your ego down. It's meant to challenge you to be a better person, to be a better soldier.
Hmm.
It comes across as them just being an asshole sometimes, but you have to take it for what it is. It's like, you're better than this. You've shown you're better than this. You were proud of how you were better than this. So what happened? You
It's more
just,
encouragement, rather.
yeah, it's like you lost your balls. What happened? Like, so, like, and that's kind of where it goes, is it challenges you to be a better person. You know,
Hmm.
they challenge you to think differently in a way that contributes to whatever the mission is.
Right. How true are the drill sergeants?
What do you mean? How
Like the
true are they?
depictions that we see on YouTube and on
Oh,
because you gotta understand, like I live in the EU. I'm from Turkey. The only thing I
yeah.
know about America is what I see in the media, and I've read stories that some of the drill sergeants are like that. And a follow up question to that is it really that intimidating? Because like, what can he do to you? Is the way I would look at it. Like, what are you gonna do? Kick me out? Put me in jail for 6 months?
It is initially it is intimidating, man. Like,
It is.
especially if you, well, initially it is, yeah.
Hmm.
Mostly because you're trying to figure out how to play the game. You're there because you want to be, not because you wanted to get yelled at. You're there because you want to do a job. You're there because you're a patriot. You're there because whatever reason you came up with, you signed on the dotted line and now you're there. And you expected what was coming. It's a game and you have to learn the rules. So initially when you get there and you're being yelled at for every tiny misstep, it's a bit intimidating.
Okay.
Once you figure out the rules of the game, it's funny.
Oh, really?
It is. It is, and a lot of shit they say is hilarious. Oh my god, dude, they're very creative with their insults. It's great. I had a notebook that I had when I was in basic training, and every time that I heard something funny, I wrote it down in this notebook. I was there for like 9 weeks during basic training, and so this book was like half full of just quotes from different drill sergeants and the funny shit they said. Well, then I was like, they're gonna find this and they're going to take this from me. So I'm going to make a copy of it. And that's exactly what happened. At some point, one of them found it. And he's like, "This is fucking great. This is mine now." And they started sharing it with the whole platoon, and they started sharing it between different platoons, and they were all laughing their heads. It was great though, man. Like there is humor in it. There really, even when you're there, there's humor in it. Once you figure out what it is you're supposed to do and how to play the game, it's funny.
It looks funny, but it's things are always funny when you're not part of it. So I was like,
Yeah.
maybe there's something more to it.
No, the only thing they can't do, at least in our military, is they can't touch you.
Okay.
They can get this close to your nose. They can't touch you.
Hmm.
That's it. They can do things like they'll correct your uniform, straighten up your lapel, or straighten up your cap, whatever.
Yeah.
But
Right.
like
Right.
that's it. And I had one drill sergeant that did push that. And so on your cap, you have your rank that sits right here.
Hmm.
On the back of the rank it's like a little metal connector. We call them dammits. And so he took my cap and he pushed it into my forehead and twisted it. So this dammit actually cut my forehead and I had some blood running down my nose like that. And so whenever he grabbed it and twisted like that, I was a bit bigger than him. I grabbed him by his lapel, picked up and pushed back, and he's like lifted from the ground. He's like, "What the fuck? You can't touch. I'm gonna take you to the first sergeant. You're gonna be court-martialed." I was like, "Look at that. You really think they're gonna take your word over mine? How about we just call it quits?"
Fair. That's
He's like,
fair.
"All right." And what was funny was after that, I was promoted within that small unit to the squad leader or whatever. And then I was brought into the drill sergeant's office and we would kick back and chill and bullshit after the day was done. So just kind of earned a little respect from him also.
Right. He probably didn't intend to make you bleed or make it hurt. I think he was just trying to, like,
No, he intended to hurt me. He
yeah,
didn't
to
intend to
hurt
make me
you.
bleed,
Yeah, right.
but
That's what I meant. Yeah. It's funny how those things usually work out because, yeah, no, never. Let's leave it at that. Let's leave it at that. Um, First time at the shooting range.
mhm.
There's a stereotype about Americans. You guys love shooting guns. Did you have any prior experience to shooting guns? Please say no.
Yes.
Damn it.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay. Do you get?
I'm glad you brought this up because I want to clear up some misconceptions about firearms in America also.
Mhm.
Right. The idea that firearms are just inherently dangerous, while true, is not the biggest threat. Because guns alone don't kill people. People kill people. And they're like, "Oh, well, you can do it more efficiently with a gun." Okay, you can do it more efficiently with a gun than with a sword. Sure. What's better than a gun if your objective is to kill people? How about a bomb? Do you have access to gasoline? Petrol? Do you
No.
have access to frozen orange juice concentrate?
Yep.
You can make napalm.
Styrofoam.
In an well, styrofoam works too. In an innumerable amount of quality. Those are things that are available to you with no restriction, no law. You can buy as much as you want. You could build it in barrels and you could set it off somewhere. You could take any amount of uh, well, not any amount, but gunpowder. You could take a lot of gunpowder. You might be able to get your hands on TNT depending on where you are. You don't need a license for that. The point I'm making is you can build a much more effective measure at killing people than a gun. Case in point, Timothy McVeigh, April 1995, Oklahoma City. He rented a moving truck, filled it with explosives, remotely detonated it, killed 165 people like that. And you're worried about
Disgusting.
me having a pistol?
Do
I'm
you
just
think?
saying.
Do you think it's people that don't have experience with weapons that make those claims?
Yes. I think any amount of exposure to weaponry will build respect for the weaponry, but it's also going to build an understanding.
Right.
Having a gun doesn't mean you're a bad person. Most of the time, it's a leisure activity. More than 98% of Americans use it as a leisure activity. It's fun. It's like archery.
in modern times.
in modern times. Yeah,
Right.
I mean, people still do archery,
Hmm.
but yeah, it's just it's target practice. We use it for hunting. That's more common here than in Europe. Um, Personally, I like to hunt. I think it's great.
Hmm. I
I've been
can't.
thinking more about getting into archery, but
It seems fun.
it does. I've been thinking about getting, and I'm not talking about a compound bow either. I'm thinking about a recurve, something more rudimentary.
Right. To come back to the thing that you said about guns, obviously I can't weigh in on it. The only thing that I get to hear how it works and how you guys feel in the United States of America is what I get told by people I hang out with or the media. Um, I can understand both sides. That being said, I
Sure.
can understand both sides. I can understand them turning around and be like, hey, you know what? Maybe you shouldn't carry guns. And I can completely understand people who have the same thought process as you. They go, you know what? Guns, they don't just automatically stand up, walk around, and start killing people. It's the person
Yeah.
controlling it. So I can completely understand both sides of the story, so to say.
Well, and the people that are going to use a gun to kill somebody else, they were going to get a gun regardless.
Right, because I can kind of weigh in on, I guess, a little bit on your side on why I think you're a little bit right. For example, in Europe, depending on which country, obviously, it's really hard to get a gun legally. It
Hmm.
is super fucking easy to get a gun illegally. Like, I know this won't get me in trouble because I'm unfortunately pretty well known at the local police station, but it will take me like, what time is it now? It's 4:30 p.m. for me. I can be back in 45 minutes with a gun. And
Outside the confines of the law.
outside the confines of the law. 45 minutes, I'll have it ready. Bullets, clean, nothing on the gun, just completely clean, untraceable. So you tell me, and this is a genuine question to anyone listening, like you tell me, what would you prefer? Like, would you rather have? Because the argument there was, I'm not sure if you were part of this conversation that we were having in the voice call a couple of days ago, a couple of weeks ago, and I think it was, yeah, it was with you. I think I asked you, it was like, the amount of violent crimes happening in states where it's legal to carry or open carry, concealed carry or open carry, are significantly lower. And I said something along the lines of, "Hey, it's a deterrent rather than
Yes.
an
Right.
active
So what we
use."
established was there's a direct correlation between the number of violent crimes versus the people that are allowed to openly carry firearms.
Right. And again, like I cannot speak too much because I'm speaking from a point of view where I don't know what I'm talking about to a certain extent, but I can understand it. I can understand having guns deters people because it is also what you see outside. Like when someone, let's say you're outside with your wife and your kids, and you're just about to get in the car, and someone knocks on the window of your car, goes like, "Hey, get the fuck out." Empty your pockets, give me your chains, drop it all. And all you do is just flash the gun, and he's like, okay, I'm sorry. And he backs off, you call the police, gets handled. It works like that. I know it works like that because I've been in that situation many times. I know how it works. I've seen it. That's my experience. And again, if we then also compare the amount of victims of unnecessary shooting, and what I would deem unnecessary shooting is not in self-defense shooting, in Europe it's significantly less. So the point I'm trying to make is, again, trying in a long term, in a long story, explaining how I can be on both sides of the fence.
Hmm.
Because what state were you again? Again, you were just about above Texas or on the left of Arkansas,
I'm both. So I'm above Texas and left of and west of Arkansas.
and that is which state?
Oklahoma.
Oklahoma. That's it. In Oklahoma, you're allowed to open carry, correct?
Yeah.
Right,
I
and
don't, but you're allowed to.
you're allowed to. So in states where you're allowed to open carry, does it also mean you're allowed to concealed carry, or are they two completely different things?
So those are considered two separate issues. In the
Okay.
state of Oklahoma, you do not need a license to conceal carry as long as you're not a felon, a convicted felon.
What I heard that term a lot. What is the definition of a felon?
A felon is a individual who has committed a crime classified in the felony unit of crimes. So you have misdemeanors, right?
Right.
those are little petty crimes, shoplifting or maybe excessive speeding or something like that. Felony is when you start getting into things like you put somebody in the hospital for a month, right? Or
Gotcha.
drinking and driving on your third occasion is a felony. If you're a convicted felon, you lose the right to firearms.
So felon doesn't necessarily mean that you've served jail time.
You almost certainly have if you're
Okay.
a felon.
Okay. And
I would be astounded if you'd committed a felony and served no time in jail.
gotcha. And what is defined a felony depends on which state, correct? Because
Maybe there's a little bit of give and take there, but largely they're the same.
right. Okay. Okay. And can you, for example, guide me through the steps of, let's say I lived in Oklahoma. I'm 21 years old. I'm a US citizen and I work a regular 9 to 5. Let's say
Hmm.
on Saturday noon I decide, you know what? I want to own a gun legally.
Hmm.
How does that procedure work?
There's a couple methods you could do. You can go to a firearms dealer. These are people that are licensed to order firearms in bulk, and they have a shop. They sell, not only guns, but they sell all the trinkets and the ammunition and everything that you can get with it. You would go there and you would fill out a form. And this form is designed to be sent through the FBI so that they can run a background check on you.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. That's cool. That's good.
That's if you buy it from a dealer
Right.
or like a licensed dealer.
Hmm.
And so this can take 30 or 45 minutes for it to come back and say, yeah, you're clean, or no, don't sell this guy a gun.
So it's a database.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep, a national database, and they pull, if you have a felony anywhere in the country, it's on their database. They have
Okay.
it. You could also you could legally buy a gun privately
Hmm.
from any citizen. There is no background check. This is kind of where the gray area gets in. It's a private sale of property being transferred from one person to another. The fact that they sell it to you without running a background check is not illegal.
Oh.
You buying it is not illegal.
Hmm.
The weapon being in your possession, if you're a felon, is the illegal part.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
So
That's
there's nothing
muddy.
stopping you. Yeah.
That,
Now it's different. That particular set of laws is different state to state.
hmm.
So, for instance, you go to Chicago, you're not allowed to own a firearm without a very expensive, intricate process to get one, without a license of some kind. You go to somewhere like Texas, you can have as many guns as you want.
Hmm.
You go to New York City, same thing, you can't have anything.
Right. And the second example that you used is because I've been explained by someone from someone on the internet that it works the same way as going to a, for example, a gun fair and being allowed to buy a
Mhm.
gun there as well, and that's also without a background check.
It used to be that way.
Oh,
They don't allow people at most gun shows now without a license to set up a booth.
okay.
It used to be that way though. Like you could show up, pay $1,000, set up a booth, and sell all day.
Hmm.
Now they require licensure for most gun shows.
That's good. I think that's good. That's a good thing to do. And how does it work with registering a weapon in America? Let's say I own a pistol, and you're
Hmm.
very interested in a pistol, and you're like, hey, you know what? I want to buy this off you, or I'll give it to you, for example. How does that registry work? Do you have to register it on your name?
No, you don't have to register at all.
But you could.
You, if you wanted to, yeah,
Right.
but
Okay.
there's no real purpose in it
Gotcha.
other than to tell the government how many guns you have. Like,
Doesn't matter.
there's not. Yeah, it doesn't. They don't care really as long as you're allowed to legally own it. So there's no point.
So it's not like with a car, for example. It's not registered to your
No.
name. Yeah. Okay.
Now, if you go buy it from a licensed dealer, yes, the gun is registered to you,
Right.
and
Because
that
you're the
goes in the
first owner.
database. Yep. Or well, it could be a used gun
Hmm.
that you bought, but yeah, it's now registered to you. You go buy it from somebody privately, it's not registered to you, and there's nothing saying you have to register. At least not in my state.
You know what really this is what makes you Americans crazy. And I'm generalizing. I'm saying it again. You Americans are crazy. You guys got so many guns in the goddamn country, and still some people still run their mouth like nothing's gonna happen, and it's
Yeah.
wild to me. Like,
There's a difference in culture, man.
wow.
Specifically, you start getting into the southern states, you want to run your mouth. Many people are going to put up their fists. They're not going to reach for their gun.
Right.
They're going to say, okay, if you really are going to say that, let's settle this.
Right.
You go to somewhere like New York City, running your mouth is all they do, largely, in a lot of places. It's considered normal to sit there and just shit talk, and nothing happens, and you guys just walk away. I wouldn't know what to do with that. Somebody gets in my face and starts la 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 talking a bunch of shit. I'm gonna slap him hard.
Yeah, it's like they get surprised. Like, again, to come back a little bit on the gun stuff, you see all these videos. I recently saw one where two women were fighting. One was in the car, and the lady in the car had a gun, and they were, running the mouth to each other, screaming, cussing each other out. And the girl recording was the one outside, and she goes, "Oh, you got a gun. What are you gonna do with it? What are you gonna do with it?" It's like, what do you mean? What are you gonna do with it? It's like, do you not register what's happening? Can you not shut up? Like, do you not see that she's got a pistol? Like, do you really want to test her? I wouldn't.
No, that's not
I,
smart.
yeah, I wouldn't. I don't care who you are, girl, man, boy, overweight, skinny. I'm not gonna test you.
There is that threat of, okay, you're going to spend the next 30 years in jail if you shoot somebody.
Yeah.
But in the heat of the moment, whenever they're emotionally charged up, is that going to stop them from pulling the trigger? I'm not going to put that to the test.
No, I've done a lot of
No.
stupid shit emotionally.
And if there's like for a lot of people, guns are a last resort measure of self-defense,
Like,
where that's not where we jump to most of the time.
I don't believe the thing. Look, I believe that most people are good people. I truly believe that. I think that we should be able to. Oh no, hold on. Where am I trying to go with this? The idea of owning a gun shouldn't be terrifying because most people are good people.
Yeah.
And the reason why I say that most people are good people is because if they weren't, there are 8 billion people on this planet. If most people were bad people, we'd live in a dystopia. We'd live in a war torn planet. We'd live in famine.
Yeah.
I think the problem is that people sometimes don't understand each other and to a certain extent don't respect each other. I think that's the problem. And I think that's also what's happening in the video that I was trying to explain to you was like, she told you this is her limit. She showed you the gun, whether it's legal or illegal, I don't care. She's like, hey, listen, you're pushing me to my limit. Leave me the hell alone. Eventually in the video, she did get shot. And the funniest part was she was surprised by it. She was totally in shock. Because, like, how? No, you're not supposed. You cannot be surprised. You can't.
One thing that a lot of people, not just Americans, people in general lack is a sense of tactical awareness.
Right.
That's the best way to put it. They live in this bubble. They live in this state of mind where they're ignorant to the dangers of the world that are very real, even in modern Western societies. We're not exempt from violent dangers that come from human to human contact, no matter where you live. Weapons are everywhere, bad attitudes, people are motivated by different things, whether it's money or greed or somebody's desperate because their child is dying. Somebody's got a reason to hurt somebody else all the time. And whether or not you're involved, whether or not you're aware of that, is not going to, excuse me, how do I said it backwards. Whether or not you are aware of that fact does not determine whether or not you're involved. If you become involved, you shouldn't be taken completely by surprise.
Right.
They might get the jump on you, but you shouldn't be completely ignorant and not expecting anything. Just like you said, there are 5 guns to every person in this country, and we have 350 million people in the US. So 350 million times 5, 1.5 billion, right? Oh no, that's not right. It's 150 billion, 150 million. No, it is
No,
1.5
yeah,
billion.
yeah,
That
it is
is
one
right.
point. Yeah,
1.5 billion guns.
that's a
So who
lot.
doesn't have a gun? That's
Everyone's
really the
dual
question.
wielding.
You're dual wielding and you got a couple on your hip. Like, you got more guns than you know what to do with. Personally, I have four, but
Right.
each one has a purpose. You know, they all do different things. When it comes to gun control specifically, let's compare it to something else that's illegal widely. In the US, um, in 1970s, President Nixon started the war on drugs. Right, we were getting a large influx of cocaine specifically from South America. This was during the time of what's his name? The Narcos.
Oh, um, Escobar.
Escobar. It's during his time. So he starts this campaign on the war against drugs, and they start trying the counter drug measures and things like that. The drugs didn't stop coming. The best estimated impact that the war on drugs campaign had on that business comes up to less than 1%.
Wow.
And it is still largely illegal today. So that was the government's best effort at controlling a substance. The government's best effort at controlling guns is going to be about the same. Less than 1% effective. If you really want a gun, if you really want drugs, you can get them.
Yep. Yeah.
It's not going to stop you. We're the people, the only thing that laws do, which there's over 20,000 gun laws in America, the only thing those laws serve to do is keep the guns out of the hands of the people that you want to have a gun. Guys like me, you want me to have a gun. Because when shit hits the fan, I'm going to make the right choices.
Right.
The people that you don't want to have guns are going to have them whether or not there's a law in effect. They don't care.
True. I fully agree, and I'm gonna take a really wide turn on this. It's the exact same conversation we're having with illegal fireworks over here in the Netherlands specifically.
Mm,
It's the exact same thing. They're trying to ban fireworks because it's dangerous. It's like, well, the ones that are legal aren't dangerous. You can literally hold them in your fist, it'll explode, and at worst, you have like a first degree burn, maybe, even for a kid. It's the illegal ones that are considered even. I'm not sure if I'm quoting this correctly. I might be off a little bit. They're actually stronger than the Dutch or the NATO hand grenade. Whatever, you'll probably know this better than me. The issued hand grenades. They're considered stronger than that. That's how strong this illegal firework is.
wow.
Yeah, it's the size of my forearm basically. They're huge. They're thick, very short fuse. They're very, very powerful. It's like, yeah, well, we want to stop that. But it's like, but you're being stupid. It's already illegal. It already is illegal. Like, I don't
Yeah.
understand what you can't make something more illegal. It either
Right.
is or it isn't.
Same thing here. Largely the people that have guns are already convicted felons. It's already illegal for them to have them. Yet,
Yeah,
there they are.
right.
So what do you do about it? Make
So,
another law?
what would you do? Well, do you have you ever thought about this? Like, I'm sure you've tried to understand the people that turn around and say, you know what, we shouldn't allow hand firearms. What would your solution be to make it harder for people who shouldn't own a gun get a gun?
You're not going to be able to do that.
Right.
That's not the discussion to have. The discussion to have is to properly educate the law abiding citizens on the handling and use of firearms. Take the fear out of it, right? It then doesn't become a fear of firearms. The fear is misplaced in firearms. The fear, if you're going to have any at all, needs to be placed in the individuals that are trying to do harm, whether or not it comes from firearms or bombs or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the fear or the concern should be placed. It's way more to do with people, but people are thrown off by this idea. Oh, it's an assault rifle and it looks scary. Okay, but it doesn't do anything on its own. It's the person behind it that's motivated to accomplish something violent. That's where you need to focus.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, well, we'll just take their gun away from him. Okay, and in 20 minutes, he's going to have another one.
Let me play
So we
devil's
did
advocate
nothing.
here. I'm gonna play devil's
Okay.
advocate here.
All right.
To come back what you said earlier, it's easy. It's easy to make a bomb if you want to kill a large group of people. You can do that.
Yep.
Um, let's say, hypothetically speaking, there is an individual and he wants to do a shooting. He would. There's a carnival happening. There's a concert happening, and he's like, you know what? I've lost my mind. I'm gonna kill as many people as possible. I'm gonna get a assault rifle. I think the point they're trying to make, the ones that turn around is like we should ban this, is make it harder to kill large groups of individuals and not necessarily the firearms themselves. So it's like, for example, I didn't know with the ingredients that you listed that you could make napalm. I assume most people don't, but I think everyone can know how to pull a trigger, pull the safety off, and pull the trigger, and just point
Yeah.
it in a rough direction. I think that's the argument they're trying to make. Um, what would you say to that?
I mean, I would agree that you need to make it harder for them to attack a large group of people, but how do you go about that? Pretty easy. You tighten up security. You
Right.
set up a physical perimeter, you have armed guards, you do a clean sweep of every person that goes into that event, and if it takes a few extra hours for that event to begin, so fucking be it. You get your metal detector wands out and you're checking everybody.
Hmm.
No firearms. A gun doesn't work without metal. Some guns are largely made of plastic, but it doesn't work without some kind of metal. The barrel, the
I'm
stock might be
so
synthetic or wooden.
I'm so bad with gun names, but there is a gun that is completely carbon fiber and it works and it's not detectable by metal detectors. I forgot which one it was. I almost want to say a Glock variant, but I'm so bad with names.
Well, and it could be, but that's fine. We want to take that a step further. We're going to pat you down.
Right.
We're going to check your waistband. We're going to have you lift your shirt up, to the belly button,
Which
not like anything inappropriate.
which in the same could be done in the same breath, like you said, metal detectors and stuff. Just
Hmm.
it's not a, it's
Or
not a
get it.
it's not like a
I'll
pen.
say
You can't
get
just
the
hide it. You feel it when you tap people down.
right, right. And if you carry a gun that is as small as a pin, which they do exist, it's firing a really small caliber, and you might get 2 shots out of it.
Right, right.
You're not killing a large group of people. You might not kill anybody at all. I mean, honestly,
Yeah.
why not get the same scanner that they have at the airport? They see everything on you, whether it's carbon fiber, metal, plastic. You have anything in your pocket, they find it.
Right. Um to kind of wrap up the army story and the gun stuff, I just want to throw in a question here. And I want you to try to answer it with, imagine you're still in the army, you're still, was it you were sergeant? Am I correct?
Hmm.
Sergeant. Still say you're sergeant. Um this whole Russia Ukraine debacle.
Hmm.
I know people are cheering. I know people are happy that Ukraine is kind of pushing back. But I think, and I'm under the impression that people who kind of understand, or people like me who like to think that they kind of understand, kind of see something bad happening soon where Russia is going to start trying to fight back and it's going to get really bloody. First of all, is that a right assumption to make? Like, I don't think Russia is very tired yet. It is, if you look in history, this is the way Russia fights his wars and always has. What what
Yeah,
how do you even keep up with all this stuff?
yeah, I do. But I also look at it from a different perspective, especially because I'm not a grunt in the army anymore.
Hmm.
If I were a grunt in the army, my perspective would be that we are probably training hard. We're looking at a possible deployment, maybe to Eastern Russia, just to prove that we can move a force in. It's a very delicate situation politically, though, because you don't want to escalate the situation to the point of nuclear war, which is what ultimately Russia would resort to if they knew they were going to be overrun. Looking at it as I am now, it's different
Hmm.
because you look at history. The Russian Federation, the Russian czars, and everything operate a very specific way. When you have a leader like Vladimir Putin, who's put himself in this um, indisputable position of power, he is now not able to escape that.
Right.
Right? The last two or three czars were executed by his own people. If Vladimir Putin invades Ukraine, when he decided to invade Ukraine, he's committed hard. He has to come away from that conflict with a win of some kind. And he has to convince his people that it's a win.
Right.
If he does not, his career is over.
His life
And
is
there's
over.
probably his 50-50 shot that his life is over too.
Right.
So right now, he is not acting in a way that's just out of his own self-interest or for the best interest of his country. He is acting in a way of self-preservation. We have to understand that concept first. So what is he doing there? Why is he wasting time and resources that his country doesn't have? His economy is in the shitter. The Russian ruble is like, it's tanked so far down that their um, international commerce has just sunk. He's running out of resources rapidly. Not him personally, his country is running out of resources rapidly. They can't keep this up for very long.
Because of the sanctions, right?
Sanctions are a big part of it. And many of the countries around the world have imposed similar sanctions. So they're not trading with people, they're not making money, they're not replenishing the resources, they can't pay their soldiers, they can't feed their own people. They're having trouble. They're in a crisis, and Vladimir Putin has to convince his people that this was worthwhile, one way or another. That's why he's still there. It's a different perspective than the perspective of a grunt in the army.
What would the perspective of a grunt in the army be?
You're going to do what you're told, and you're preparing to go to war.
Right.
That's the long and short of it.
When you said nuclear weapons, do you mean again the terminology I might not know, um, like small warhead tactical nukes, or do you mean like full blown MAD?
I wouldn't pretend to know what the tactics they're contemplating are.
Hmm.
It could be either. It could be large scale. We know what we're done for, and our country is sunk, and the whole world's gone to shit. So we're going to blow you all up and take you with us. That could be the way they go. The Russians largely, historically, have treated their soldiers like cockroaches, and they just send wave after wave after wave, and that's the way they fight. Um, they do outfit their troops with some really good gear.
Really?
I think that if yes, they do. They
Okay.
do. For every 12-man squad, they have at least one thermobaric shoulder-fired weapon. What that means is it's a shoulder-fired rocket launcher that has the capacity to both use overpressure to be effective, but it also has the capacity to store some sort of propellant after the explosion, meaning it can set it on fire.
Thermobaric, doesn't that mean that it's gets rid, again, lack of terminology, gets rid of oxygen in a certain radius? Or am
It
I thinking of
consumes the oxygen,
consumes the oxygen? Right.
and like it gets very hot very fast, and boom. So what happens is as that explodes, everything within a certain radius of that explosion, as it disperses, it burns. The oxygen in that area burns, and it creates this wave of pressure. There's also that misconception about explosions and how they kill people, because what we see in the movies, they're like, oh, you're killed by shrapnel, or you're killed by the fire. You're killed by the pressure.
Your organ
The
systems.
pressure, yep, it'll liquefy your insides, literally. Pressure.
Horrible.
Now, the thermobaric rocket that's fired, there's one for every 12 people. In each squad, they have 3 machine gunners and then 8 riflemen. The US military is set up differently, where we have 2 machine gunners and 8 to 10 riflemen. And then usually you may have a few grenades,
Hmm.
but that's about it. And it's going to depend on the unit, whether you're in a tank unit, light infantry, heavy infantry, but largely that's how it's outfitted. What the Russians don't have is a decent understanding of logistics and maintenance. That's not what they do well. When the
And
Soviet Union
sorry to cut
dissolved
you
in,
off. Sorry to cut you off. Just very quickly. This is a very famous quote that I've really taken to heart. War isn't war. War isn't won with weapons, but with logistics. Right? I forgot whose
that's
quote
what we
that was.
believe. Yeah.
That's yeah. That's what
The
we,
Western world believes
the
that.
Western world. Yeah. Please continue. Sorry to cut you off again.
No, it's okay. In 1988, when the Soviet Union dissolved and Ukraine became their own sovereign nation, they immediately began training their military with the US. The only way they knew how to fight was the way the Russians did. So they paired with us, and ever since then, the National Guard from California, which is a component of the Army, frequently travels to and from Ukraine, training them in the Western tactics, placing a heavy emphasis on maintenance and logistics. You maintain your vehicles, and you have a steady supply line. Because from our standpoint, at least within the Army, we go to an area and we move in and we stay there. And we have supplies that run to that forward area, and from that forward area, it's branched out. It goes to many different places, and that supply line keeps on coming. Right? The Russians move into an area and run out of gas. Now what?
Right.
You have a tank that can fire a cannon, but it can't move. It's just a cannon. So, and that's where we're actually starting to see a large difference over the past almost year since they invaded Ukraine, is they do not have that emphasis on maintenance or logistics. And I think that's why they had a very good surge initially into Ukraine from the Russian standpoint, and now over time they're being pushed back because they can't sustain it.
Right.
Not unlike Nazi Germany in 1940.
Oh, yeah.
Very rapid expansion, and then it started dissipating,
Hmm.
and they started getting pushed. They were largely pushing into Russia, but from the Western Front, they couldn't keep up with it. They didn't have the supply lines, they didn't have the maintenance, and it's very similar.
Scary. It's really scary. Um, I don't know the full details of this, but I've been told that this is the tactic that Russia, like the way the war has played out, that this is how they actually wanted it to go, where they had a rapid um, deployment, so to say, in within Ukraine. So go cross the borders, get certain key cities, have it be damaged by warfare, being pushed back. That's what they expected, and that they're now preparing for a counteroffensive with air superiority. How true is that? Because for as far as I know, they can have air superiority. They don't have the equipment for a ground warfare, from what I've gathered from the media. So let's say that's all bogus. That's not going to happen. Do you think it makes sense for Ukraine to push past their own borders and move into Russia? Because then you're going to have what you said. They're going to be on their last leg. And then things can get very scary.
Yeah. So politically, pushing them beyond their own borders is going to force the Russian administration into a state of desperation.
Right.
You control your own territory, you stop at the border. The rest of the world will determine what the punishment is for Russia and let justice be served as it is. Whether that's just blocking international commerce or whatever the case may be. Um, but your job as a Ukrainian is not to seek revenge. It's to reclaim what's already yours and maintain that.
Right.
Now you can go to NATO and you could go to these other countries and you can make, worldwide public statements now. So you guys have all been watching this, you know what's going on. I would love to be part of the discussions, but we need to decide what's going to happen to Russia now. How we're going to justify this. They have to answer for what they've done.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I use they lightly. There's a very select group of people in Russia. Not all Russians are bad.
Of
I
course
have
not.
Russian friends,
Yeah.
right? Most Russian people agree with us in the Western world. We shouldn't be there. What are we doing there? There's many young conscripts there that don't want to be there.
I mean, you're wiping out a whole generation of young men.
Yeah.
On your side, let alone on the Ukrainian side, you're literally destroying families, killing families, not destroying, killing them.
I saw an interview where there was a unit of, and they looked like boys to me. They had to have been no older than 18 or 19 years old, a lot of them. And they were like, we didn't even know we were going into Ukraine. We were told we were coming over here for a training exercise. The next thing you know, we're fighting. It's like, wow, that's how you guys operate in your military? Like that's how you treat your soldiers? They don't even want to be there. They didn't know they were going there.
It's sad. It's so sad. What did you mean with? You said something about East Russia, deployment in East Russia.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
If you secure the eastern border of Russia and then start working your way towards the north, you take away the capability for them to travel with their planes over the pole.
Hmm.
That's what I do for a living, is I'm a contractor for the Air Force in Alaska.
Hmm.
And it's my job to maintain and repair airspace radars that are looking specifically at that direction, west and north, for Russian and Chinese aircraft.
Right.
There's a line of radars that starts in Alaska and it goes up the western border of Alaska with a couple on the inland, and it travels across the northern border of Alaska into Canada all the way into Greenland. And it's called the DEW line, distant early warning. And that's all they do is they monitor for aircraft that are coming over the North Pole.
Do you think it's a real possibility that the U.S. might set foot on Russian soil?
Taking a moment to think about that.
Like realistically, everything's possible.
A lot of things would have to go really wrong for a large scale force of US troops to move into mainland Russia.
Right.
If I'm being perfectly honest, our Green Berets and Navy SEAL teams are probably already there, realistically.
Hmm.
Um, but in terms of like a large scale unit that's not clandestine,
Hmm.
it's ones you can't hide, that's going to be tough. I think that there's a lot of events that would have to unfold for the U.S. to become involved large scale like that, almost with the assurance that there's no threat of nuclear war.
Right. Right.
Like the Russians don't really want a nuclear war any more than we do.
And nobody does. Like, let's be real
Um,
here. Like, it's the internet, right? Everyone just armchair generals. But when shit hits the fan, they shut up real quick. And for years, we've been fear mongered about the Russian capability and the Russian weapons and how terrible they are, and how big they are, and what they can do. And it was quite funny to see. Well, funny is probably a wrong word in this context, but it was
Funny odd,
shocking.
not funny haha.
Yeah, exactly. Funny, odd. It was shocking to see um, such a small military as the Ukrainian military not being able to hold off, but even to push back the Russian military. And then you start questioning certain things. And one of the things that I'm questioning right now is is it really a possibility to have nuclear warfare? Like big scale. Like to me, I was having this conversation a couple weeks ago with a really close friend of mine. I was like, dude, I am 99.9% sure there will never ever be a large scale nuclear war. I don't see that happening because it's suicide for everyone.
Yes, it is, but it's not about a group of people, not a large group of people. You have to weigh the decisions on a very select group. We're talking like 20 people at most in
Mhm.
Russia to make that decision whether or not to go nuclear. If you're dead anyway and you know it, that's your way to leave your mark, right? Just destroy all of humanity because you know what's coming. That's where the fear comes from because it's not about the people. It's how desperate is that upper, top less than 1% echelon of Russia
Hmm.
and the people that are stakeholders and have their ears bent, in that direction. Those are the people that make that decision. So if you push them to that point of desperation, the ones that have the capability to push the button, it doesn't matter what the rest of the country thinks.
True. To be fair, I think that this applies to every country. I think
Yeah.
the civilians are don't have much to say as much as we want. Most of the decisions, not every decision, has been made by a small group of individuals, which is understandable but also scary, right?
Well, and that wouldn't bother me, except they try to push this illusion that the people are in charge.
Right. At least don't lie to me. At least
Right.
don't lie to
I
me.
like my bullshit out in the open where I can see it.
Right.
You know.
Exactly. Yeah. That conversation we can have for hours.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. That's. I always say democracy doesn't work, but it's the best we have.
I think
On the
there
surface
are better
level.
ways, but yeah, on the surface level, like I actually liked the Roman approach where they had democracy, and then in a time of defense or war, they appointed a leader who temporarily was considered a monarch in his own right. The only problem with that is when we saw with Caesar, he didn't let it go.
Right. And then he got stabbed.
So yeah, and then he got killed. So, but other than that, it actually worked. It takes for the U.S. to go to war. The president can't declare war. People overestimate how much power our president has. He can station troops anywhere in the world by our laws legally anywhere for up to 60 days without the approval of Congress. After 60 days, they have to come home. Congress, meaning the House of Representatives and the Senate, which makes up a group of somewhere in the neighborhood of 400 people, decide whether or not we go to war,
Mhm.
which is a much better choice. The problem with that is it takes too long to decide.
Right.
They have to debate. They can't do anything without having a conversation for a week about it.
True. Which is, let's be honest, that it's sometimes it's most of the time it's the right thing. Like
Yes.
let's talk about it first. Weigh
Yeah.
in if it's worth it or not. And
Now, if we've gotten to that point where we decide, okay, yes, we need to take military action, let's suspend that. Now we have a leader who makes the calls.
right.
On this date, we are going to reevaluate this power.
Isn't that what a commander in chief is though?
The commander in chief, if the U.S. has approved going to war, now he does make the decisions.
Okay,
Sort
so
of.
what do you mean sort of?
I mean, yes, what he says happens, but he is a puppet.
Right.
He has what's called the chiefs of staff, which are the top ranked officials of each branch of the military. And they live in his office, basically. So like the president's, I want to do this, this, and this. It's like, well, we don't have that equipment, sir. We just don't. Or, well, we don't want to do that because of this. Or, okay, we can accomplish half of that. We're going to have to wait 6 months to do what, but that's what they're there for.
Right. Okay. Hmm. Scary. This whole
So, yeah.
Yeah, this whole Russia Ukraine situation is it didn't come out of left field, but it also did because um, I grew up in a household where the news was always on, and
Mhm.
my dad grew up in a time where I'm not sure how well you know Turkish history, but between the 70s and the early 90s there was a lot of political violence, so to say. There were a couple of coups happening. Um, you know, now we come to find out, or tinfoil hat on, we come to find out it was mostly Russia trying to intervene with our politics by trying to support communism and all that bullshit around it, and the opposition and stuff. So I come from a household where you question everything on the news.
Hmm.
It, for example, let's say CNN, right? CNN is considered by Americans as left or right.
Very left.
Very okay. Let's say CNN, and let's say I identify as someone who's very left. I look at CNN, and in my household, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter they say the things that they say. You read between the lines. You always try to ask questions. So I always kind of saw this coming that Russia was going to do something. I had no idea where, which country, when. Didn't have a clue, but I knew something was coming. And the moment I heard about Ukraine, Russia, I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm gonna live through this in my early 20s, or sorry, late 20s, and I'm gonna see this unfold real time. This is not
Yeah.
gonna be happening in my 50s or my 60s. This is happening right now, and knowing a little bit of European history, this is scary. It's very scary because Russia is not a country that backs down. They just don't.
This is just not anything new, though.
Nope,
It's
definitely
really
not.
not.
Nope.
10 years before, 15 years before, Russia invaded Georgia.
Yep.
Where was the coverage then?
None.
Why wasn't it covered? This is the same exact thing.
Armenia, Georgia, to some extent, Azerbaijan.
Mhm.
They did the same with the Chechens, which was technically autonomous region, but Chechens you could throw in the same pot. And 2014 was it, and they first got into Crimea,
That sounds right.
right? So this is like you looking back on it, everyone should realize that it was going to happen. But even during the moment, you could have kind of seen it coming.
Yeah.
So the question is, like you said, why was there no coverage? Why is this a big deal?
Well, and I don't even really care about that. What I'm saying is people are drawn to the Ukrainian-Russian war because there is coverage.
Right.
If it was treated with the same regard as it was with any of those other countries you listed, nobody would give a fuck about it. There wouldn't be mercenaries from all over the world in Ukraine right now.
Right.
There just wouldn't. But that's the way it's being played out. So that begs the question, who decided to cover this war? Who made the decision for the American media specifically, and I know it has reaches all over the world, to have that influence to support Ukraine? There's a reason for it. That's where we have to read between the lines.
Yep.
You see, so somebody decided that Ukraine's important. Somebody has influence over the media companies that motivated the American people, that forced our leadership to address it because of the concerns of the Americans and the sheep that watch the fucking news all the time, and they're spoon fed all of their information, and all they do is regurgitate things instead of think for themselves. And what ends up happening is now the whole world is confused and scared, and they're concerned about Ukraine. Well, how come you weren't scared and confused about Crimea? How come you weren't concerned about Georgia? Why?
Yeah.
Why is it now a big deal? Because somebody else told you it was important. Because somebody else put it on your TV for you. Because you're being spoon fed propaganda. It's control. Now you want to do something about it? Fine. Okay. You do whatever you feel is right. But don't pretend like this is the first time this has happened.
Propaganda goes both ways. People don't realize
It
that. People
does.
think propaganda is only what the enemy does, or enemy,
Oh, yeah.
quotations. Like, no, there is propaganda in everything. Everything, everyone has their idea or their agenda, which is apparently a term we use now. Well, at least in Europe, we didn't tend to use that word 10 years ago, but everyone's trying to push their agenda. And that is, to a certain degree, natural. But you decide whether that's right or wrong on a global scale.
You cannot convey information or receive information through whatever conduit without a certain level of bias.
Yep.
It doesn't, and you may think you're being objective all the time. You may try to remove emotion from it, but your experiences and your upbringing, your environment, and even your social culture is going to determine your biases. Every author in the world has biases. Every screenwriter, every politician, every person conveys information with bias, whether or not you want to.
Yep.
We have to understand that. If you really want to think for yourself, you have to begin there.
What I was told at a very young age is that you should always try to listen to as many sources as possible and find the middle road. See what makes sense to you.
I think that's good advice. I think that finding facts is also becoming harder because
Yes.
people are allowed to just spit out whatever they want all over everywhere.
Yep.
And that's fine. I agree with that, right? But if you really want to get down to the truth, it is becoming harder to find things that's hard evidence. People will spit their opinions out as if it's fact, and they'll tout it as fact. And oftentimes it's skewed. Here's a good example. There's a lot of media coverage regarding racial issues in the US. It is so far covered. The average American believes that African Americans make up about 45% of our population. Like, wow, it's such a big issue. There must be that many people. In reality, African Americans make up only about 11% of the US population. But it's such a largely covered issue in the media that it's blown out of proportion. And the same thing can be said about, the sexuality and transgender issues. They're just blown up on media. They only make up 3 to 5% of our population. But people think they make up 30, 40% of us.
Right.
It's the way the information is conveyed, the way people take in information. It's skewed, it's biased, and then you have people that don't fact check. So
Just to
they
clear,
end up with this
just to clarify for people listening, I'm kind of put up a shield in front of Cal right now. He's not saying he doesn't care about the individuals. He's saying that there's a misconception about the amount of people that are within the United States of America. So he's
right.
saying that there are less people than the media makes it out to be. Just so to be clear, I don't
That's
want
right.
anyone to send him hate mail or whatever. I've
Right. No,
spoken
and I'm
to
not.
him. He's very open minded. I would take it as a compliment and assault. In my books, you are very open. What's the correct term? Liberal, I guess. Oh, I don't know. Like very open. You don't like as long as you leave me alone. You do whatever you want, type of person. So just so everyone knows, I hope you didn't forget what you were
Yeah.
gonna say. Yeah,
No, libertarian, I think, is where you were going with
was that
that.
it? My bad.
That's okay. Yeah, no, and the premise of that is if it harms none, do what you will.
Yep,
That's what I believe.
me too.
So, and that applies to everybody. It does not matter to me whether are whatever. Doesn't matter.
Whatever you are, or
It
whoever
doesn't.
you are.
Yeah, as long as you're not hurting anybody else, and as long as you are not mentally unhealthy and trying to hurt yourself, I don't care what you do.
Yep, I agree. That was just a quick clarification for everyone listening.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you did that because I can get derailed a lot of times and people misunderstand what I'm trying to say. It's not that the issues are not important. It's that the way that those issues were reported made people believe things were far more skewed than they really are. And it depends largely on which source you hear it from too.
Yeah, like I see that, for example, in the Turkish media. The Dutch media I don't really follow that much, but the Turkish media I try to, and it's been really hard to follow because my dad was the person who was watching the news all the time, and since he's passed, it's kind of disappeared from my life. But all the independent channels are now state owned, and you can really tell like they're really trying to push the agenda. And this is one of the things I'm not gonna hide. I'm not gonna pretend. The leader in Turkey, bro, I hope you die a slow and miserable death. I don't care what you do. I got dual nationality, bitch. You can't do nothing to me. That guy is something else. Like, like it's like me looking you straight in the eyes, Cal, and saying the sky is purple, and you turn around and like, no, it's purple. It's purple. And I'm going to keep repeating the lie until you go from it's not purple to is it? Maybe it is. Well, no, it's purple. Okay, it's purple. I'll die on the hill that it's purple. It's like they're just brainwashing people and they just can't see it. And it's like maddening. And they're like, whoa, this channel said it. And I compared it to the third and fourth channel and they're saying it too. Therefore, it must be right. It's like you have no idea. The media is, like, to come back what you said, learn to think. Like
It's
those.
a hard skill to learn because a lot of people there's no streamlined way to do it because we all think differently. We don't think the same. We can think alike. How we get there is going to be different.
Yes, yes, and I'm sure, 100% sure that I've fallen for the media numerous times,
Mm.
and maybe I am right now. Who knows? But it's
So my method is a bit different. I have no social media. I'm not on Facebook. I now have a Twitter that follows my stream channel, and that's it. And the only reason I have that is for the people that are interested in me. But I don't go through Twitter and look at news articles and stuff. I look at the people that I'm following, that I'm connected to, and that's it. But I don't have Facebook. I don't have anything like that. I don't watch the news. There's no accurate information there. There are a few accurate facts that are skewed one way or another, but it does me no good. So I have to go and find my resources. I have to go find my information elsewhere. And that's also a double-edged sword because now I am removing myself from a large amount of information, even though it's skewed. But instead of trying to correct information that's wrong, I'm starting at zero.
right.
So everybody else is starting at -40, right? And then having to correct it back to zero and then find the real facts to get it +40. I'm starting at zero. I have nothing. I have to go find the facts. I have to verify my facts if I want to learn about world news. And a lot of people are like, oh, that's just inconvenient. Okay, but it's accurate.
Well, the first thing that popped in my mind was because we were talking about biases, like how do you try to not find sources or uh, websites or books that give you facts that are as little biased as possible?
The only things that you can say for sure like that are going to be scientific studies that show you raw numbers. It's going to be dry information. It's not going to be entertaining. It's investigative work that is not necessarily fun. It's facts.
There's no
Dry,
emotion
raw
attached
facts.
to it. Yeah.
Right. Right. So you can look at medical studies. You can look at all kinds of scientific studies. Doesn't have to be medical. And you can get raw scientific data. Again, not really entertaining, not great for TV, but it's accurate.
Interesting.
That's where you pull information from. And then you pull your information from things like that and you formulate your opinion. You think about these facts. What does that imply? What does it actually indicate? So when again you ask an average American about the population of a certain demographic, and it's skewed out of proportion. Why? They didn't have a dry statistic. All they knew was how much media coverage it had, how big the issue was in the moment. It's like, okay, but how many people does this actually apply to? 11%, 3%? It's still an important issue, yeah, but it's not affecting as many people as you think it is
Hmm.
if you're looking at it from a grand scale.
Yeah. Yeah. Because if you turn those percentages into numbers with a population of, let's say, let's round it down, right? Let's round it down by quite a bit of margin. Instead of 350, let's say 300 million Americans live in the United States.
Yeah,
11% is, what is that, 33 million? That's a,
33 million.
yeah, that's a lot of people. But if you compare that to the total amount of people, it's back to the percentage,
It's
it's
a,
11.
it's a drop
So,
in the bucket.
exactly. So, yeah, it's a drop in the bucket, technically. It's interesting. Um, we're kind of running out of time. So I kind of want to ask you about your religion.
Oh,
Um, yeah, for people that are interested in what I believe in, I grew up in a Islamic family. My family is Muslim. Um, we're not that hard of we're not very religious. Um, and the way I look at religion, I'm just going to keep this very short. Um, The way I look at religion is more about my actions and my morality. It's a guide for me to try to do the right thing, try to be a good person, and live with that. That's the way I use religion. Um, but for anyone interested, we're Sunni Muslims, SUNNI. Um, Tell me about yours, Cal, because you mentioned it very briefly, but I didn't want to talk about it because I wanted to save it for the podcast.
Okay. So I'm a Norse pagan. What that means is we follow a polytheistic pantheon based out of the ancient Scandinavian peoples, which predates Christianity by several thousand years. And it comes from their Germanic tribes, and it's evolved over time even since then. Our understanding of what those gods are and what those energies represent vary from practitioner to practitioner. There's so much to cover.
Let's just go up. Like, how did you, for example, find out about Norse pagan? Do you come from a Christian background?
So I don't come from a background like that.
Okay.
I This is actually heretical for me,
Okay.
and it's not. There's no hard rules like there are in Islam or Christianity. I say that there's nowhere in our documented sources that say do this, don't do that. There are things that are considered honorable and things considered dishonorable, and it's largely dictated by the culture that you're in and the people you're around.
Okay.
For instance, hospitality is considered to be one of the more important traits that you can have. If you have a guest, you're expected to treat them like they're royalty. And when you are a guest, you're expected to be polite
Right.
and not ask for too much, right? And that sounds like something simple that we do every day, but we take that to a spiritual level. um, there's a lot of branches of Norse paganism, and it's called many different things. You have like Norse paganism, heathenry, contemporary Germanic paganism, Norse polytheism, and then you have some specialty groups like the Odinists,
Mhm.
who only worship one deity among many that I believe in. And there's a lot of negative connotation that comes with what I believe because there were some white supremacy groups that followed the same faith,
Oh.
and they still exist today.
Hmm.
That's not to say that we're all white supremacists, because I'm definitely not. Um, but they are out there. They're not large in numbers. They're very small, select groups, but they draw the most attention naturally.
Yeah.
So there's a few things that are involved in it with spirituality, though. I'll try and just keep some quick facts rather than try to dive deep into it. um, Mythology, that's an interesting one. You have some practitioners that are what we call mythic, how do they say it? Mythic literalists, or mythic literalism is what it's called, where they look at the myths, the stories about the gods, and they think about it. This is how it happened exactly as it's written, and they don't look beyond that. They view the gods as actual humanoid beings floating somewhere in their own realm. I don't think of the gods that way. Some people do. I think of the gods more as a primal force or a primal energy that we can draw from. So when you have the energy of, say, Odin, what we know about Odin from the myths is he is that energy that makes us chase after wisdom, to learn more, to try and understand more about what's going on. And there are many other things about Odin that could be said, but that would be like one of the main things, right? The energy of Tyr. He is a god of war, but he's also a god of justice, martial justice, not like court of law, but like if you were going to react violently in defense or in whatever case, you do it in a way that's justified.
Mm.
There's that primal feeling. Am I doing the right thing? And that's what I believe that God is. That particular God is. And there are multiple deities that bring their own primal forces with that. And then beyond the gods, there's other beings like the land spirits, the ones that keep the balance in nature, and you can interact with them. You can also interact with your ancestors. So there's many factions that, and it's a highly complicated religion that I wish could be simplified down for everybody to understand, but it takes a lifetime to really grasp it. I still don't understand everything fully.
Hmm. Maybe it's a good thing that it isn't easily simplified, because things that are easily simplified are easily dismissed.
That's true. They're also easily torn apart by logic.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, the way I look at religion, any religion, is I don't believe that there's any religion out there that's inherently bad or negative. I think every religion out there is out there to make people a better version of themselves, to have a certain type of connection to either a higher being or nature or your brothers and sisters in, miles away. That's the way I see it.
Sure.
Like you said earlier, with for example, that there's a small group of white supremacists in Norse paganism. That unfortunately, they're a vocal minority, and you have that with everyone. Like, for God's sake, for the last 20 to 30 years, all you see is radical Muslims on the television.
Yeah.
Like, I don't mean this in a threatening way, but if our book told us to kill anyone who is the Muslim, there's 1.5 billion Muslims out there. Like, the world would look completely differently
Yes.
if all of us were on a
Yes. It is
warpath.
a major religion.
Yeah. The same with
Well, and
Christianity. Like,
historically, you look at it, they tried to do that. The Christians did during the Crusades.
yeah, they tried 11, 13 times.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the Arabic Emirates hired mostly Turkic mercenaries in to fight for them. So yeah, interesting. History is interesting. I joked about it. I'm not sure if I did it on the podcast or if I did it before, but we were just talking about it, about Norse paganism, and with the Avengers stuff, with like Odin, Thor, and
Oh.
Loki. Yeah, yeah. Um, so in Norse paganism, and I already want to excuse myself because I constantly. Well, no, mid sentence, I realized I never do that. I was gonna say I confuse the gods with like Jupiter, Mars, and stuff, but I don't do that because they're named after planets, and Norse is different.
Similar idea. Those are the Roman gods.
Yeah, the Roman gods. Sorry. Um, is there a set number of gods within Norse paganism?
No.
No, there's many of
There
them.
are so there are 12 main gods that live within Aesir, is what we call their tribe.
Hmm.
But we consider that its own realm, much like Earth,
Right.
right? So like there's not only 12 of us, there's many of us that go unnamed, there's many of us that go unnoticed, but there are several notable people within this realm. The ones that we actively follow and try to emulate would be um, sort of those main 12 with some minor outlying gods as well. But there is no like set number. And some people will argue that there is, but in the sources that I've found, I can show you where it's not. It's not limited.
Right.
If you believe in them as actual beings.
Hmm. With Norse paganism, for example, when I look at, um, let's call it the original faith, just as to get my point across, of the Turkic people was Tengriism, which is a form of, I guess, paganism, which is connection with Mother Nature, which is shamanism, which is all sorts of stuff. We, for example, have lots of trinkets and lots of everyday items nowadays that come from Tengriism. What are some of the things that, for example, Norse paganism has that you see in everyday life that we don't realize is Norse paganism? Is there anything like that?
Yeah. One surefire marker is the Mjolnir, which
Okay.
is named after Thor's hammer. Right. But I've got mine on right here.
How heavy is it?
That's
Just
it
kidding.
actually is kind of heavy. This one's made of iron. Um, so it's a representation of your faith, but we also use it largely as an amulet of strength.
Mhm.
not dissimilar from the way a Christian may reach up and grab their crucifix, but I can reach up and grab my hammer, speak to Thor, and attempt to draw strength from him when I feel I need it on a very spiritual level. Sorry, I'm unable to get my throat clear. Hang on.
That's all right.
Here's another one, and not all Norse pagans wear them, but this is called an arm ring.
Mm-hmm.
This one actually kind of resembles horse hooves on the end there. To me, that's reminiscent of Sleipnir, which is an 8-legged horse that Odin rides. What the arm ring represents differs from Norse pagan to Norse pagan, but largely it's a sign of you belong to a specific tribe or group. In antiquity, the arm ring was given by chieftains to their people whenever they proved themselves in some way, usually in combat. It's like, okay, here's a gift for you. And you wear it proudly. It was almost like their jersey for being on their team. And oftentimes they would make promises or oaths on their arm ring.
Inscripted, I assume.
There's, I'm sorry?
Inscripted, I assume.
No, not
Or
inscripted.
just
It's
verbally.
like, I swear on my arm ring that I will
Oh,
do this or
gotcha.
something,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
It does happen, and it does happen now. There's a goddess named Var, which is the goddess of oaths, and we often consider her present at like marriage ceremonies, and if we also consider her present every time you make a promise. We also have to understand that where this virtue came from was from a people that were largely illiterate. The spoken word was all you have, and your word was considered absolutely binding. This arm ring was meant to remind you of your promises, to ensure that you keep them, because Var, according to our sources, has every right to punish you if you don't. Well, okay, if you attempt to break your oath or vow, it was considered cowardly. You were often cast out from your village if you lived there, if you were caught.
Was that
So
serious?
it was that serious.
Wow.
It was
Okay.
that serious. And I carry not the same seriousness. I try to keep the same intensity on that for myself. So when I say something, I mean it. To kind of keep on par with that, something my grandfather told me was you're free to think whatever you want, however you want. As soon as you convey words, whether it's spoken or written or texted or whatever, you've sent those words out into the world and you can't have them back. They're gone. So no matter how much you want to take them back, no matter how much you didn't mean it, they're gone.
They're out in the world and they can either bring joy to people or they can hurt people, they can confuse people. Right.
So the moral behind that lesson, behind what he said, was to take care with your words. Think carefully before you speak, and think carefully before you convey any message.
That's hard. That's really hard. Like you can be 80 years on this planet, but you still sometimes misspeak. And it's good to have something like that with you to as a constant reminder. That's powerful.
That and you make God, you make. Can we pause for just a second so I can try and clear my throat out?
Of course, no problem at all.
Hang on a second.
And we're back.
Oh, but yeah, so placing a heavy emphasis on truth and integrity is another thing, and I don't think that makes me a bad person. There are things that I do, they're good deeds, not motivated just for the idea of being good. For instance, I might make a donation to a charity as an offering to a god or to a land spirit in expectation of something reciprocal,
Mhm.
right? It doesn't matter that I gave it to the charity. And a lot of times, let's be perfectly honest. When it comes to homeless people, do I have much concern for them? Not really. It doesn't affect my everyday life. Do I care? Yeah, I care. Do I care enough to do something about it 10 hours a day? No. I care enough to write them a check
That's
It's
very
going to a good
honest of you.
cause.
That's
Let's
that's that's so honest of you because almost so many people would sit here and bullshit and be like, "Oh, I care, I care, I can." And at the end of the day, they won't do anything about it. I respect your honesty.
thank you. I think that's really what it comes down to is okay, you do you want homeless people to have homes? Yes. Are you willing to do something about it? No. Well, then what good was the yes?
Yeah.
So but I also believe that if I do something like that, or I write a check to a charity to help homeless people, yeah, they benefit from it. And that's great. And I'm doing a little something to contribute, but it's not completely altruistic. I believe that the gods will bless me with something in return for that.
Hmm.
And I really do believe that. So while it is a worthwhile cause and it does, I think, help the world, I am kind of acting out of self interest.
I mean,
There's something called the gifting cycle. The Havamal is a poem in the Poetic Edda, which is probably our most sacred source of information. And the Havamal is considered the words of Odin. And one of the things he says in the Havamal is that a healthy friendship, a healthy relationship is fostered by frequently visiting and mutual gift giving. So I give to a certain charity, right, as an example of an offering or as a sacrifice in modern times, as a gift to Odin, or as a gift to Tyr, or as a gift to Thor, or one of the other gods, whoever I'm trying to interact with, in the expectation that they will continue the gifting cycle and bless me in one way or another.
right. So, yeah, it's giving, knowing, or believing that you'll get something in return.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and not necessarily proportional. It might
No,
be
but
something
it's
small.
if you look at it in modern times, it's um, for example, paying forward a coffee at Starbucks for the guy behind you in line, or yeah,
It's more personal than that. It
it's
is more personal than that.
the word
And
I'm
I'll tell
looking
you
for
why.
is trying to be an example, I guess.
Here's a better comparison. Let's say you have a select group of friends, right? Like 4 or 5 that you regularly interact with. You guys hang out, whatever. Imagine if every time one of you went to one another's house, you brought a gift. What would that mean to you when your friend just shows up? And it doesn't have to be anything big. Maybe he shows up with an expensive whiskey. It's like, hey, man, let's share a drink together, and then you can have the bottle. Not a big deal,
Right.
right? It doesn't seem like a big deal, but in that moment, it's like, wow, like you actually took time and money to go out of your way to bring me something. And I just wanted to hang out with you.
Yeah.
And then you go to his house and you bring him something, something small, not a big deal. But your relationship with that person is going to become way more intimate. You're going to connect with them deeper because you let them know you've been thinking about this. You've been looking forward to visiting with them.
Right. You went
That's
out
the
of your
sort of
way
relationship.
to do something
Yep.
extra.
That's right.
Right.
And that's the relationship I have with the gods and with my ancestors.
That's beautiful. That truly is beautiful. So, apart from Mjolnir, the hammer of Odin, was it correct?
Hammer of Thor,
Hammer
Mjolnir.
of Thor,
Yeah.
sorry, Mjolnir. Um, like for example, we have the evil eye. I'm sure you've seen it. It's the blue circle with resembles an eye, and
Right.
it's supposed to cast away evil spells and negativity and stuff. Um, which nowadays in Europe, I see it fucking everywhere. It's crazy. Um, what other items that like for example I would see in Europe or someone else in the United States of America would see that is actually Norse pagan that you're like you probably didn't know because the Mjolnir is not something that you see a lot. Is there any at all?
There are, but they're actually not really all that visible.
Okay.
A lot of times people will make amulets out of things, usually natural materials, either bone or rock or something like that, and they'll inscribe it with specific runes and with a very specific intention, and they'll wear it with them, and that is supposed to accomplish different things. Some of it is for protection, some of it's for endurance. There's many uses for it. The runes are a whole subject unto themselves, which there are some right here.
Right.
I have runes tattooed on my head for those of you that are just listening. The runes have where to begin with the runes? The runes in antiquity were dual purpose. For those that could read and write, that was their writing system. It was their alphabet. But they also were sigils that represented different energies. So, for instance, Kinas is a rune. It looks like a kind of like partial part of an arrow. I have that here on my head.
Hmm.
Kinas is a rune of enlightenment. It's a rune of disclosure. It's a rune of bringing things out that were once secret. That's what it's for. And when used in tandem with other rune sets, you can accomplish a wide variety of things, or you can uncover information that you're looking for. So that's just one example of a rune. And the runes vary in intensity and power. The rune Thurasaz is a highly unpredictable rune in its mode of use, but it's designed to cause a drastic change very quickly. How you limit that will determine its power. So, for instance, let's say that your career is just in the tank.
Right.
You need a change. So you enact Thurasaz. Well, Thurasaz may completely destroy the job you have by making that company go under, and then present you with a new opportunity. That's a very drastic, illustration, but you see the point I'm getting at.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's highly uncontrollable. It will accomplish what it's trying to do, though, if you know what you're doing. And anybody that's listening that wants to use the runes, I do not condone that. You need about a year of study before you start fucking with the runes, or they will blow your life up. I'm not kidding. There is something very real in the power of runes. Just for those of you that are listening.
Which is actually quite funny because the runic systems in Norse paganism or Norse mythology is very, very similar to the, I guess, the alphabet or the runes that we have in old Turkic religions. And there's a lot of similarities between Norse paganism and Tengrism. And one of the major ones is, for example, the Tree of Life. We have the exact same depiction and the exact same understanding of the Tree of Life. So it's very fascinating to hear you talk about this. And at points I go like, I recognize that. I recognize that. Hey, I heard about that.
So what you call the tree of life, we call the world tree or Yggdrasil,
Yep.
and that is said to connect the nine realms. So it connects the gods to us. It connects us to the afterlife in many ways. Um, so yeah, it's the world tree or Yggdrasil is it's an illustration. I don't think it's a physical tree like some people do, but
That'd be a big tree.
I think it's a really big tree. I view it as I view the myths largely as well, also kind of two-sided. One, it explains the energies and the forces that we feel, but it also was entertainment. When you're sitting around a fire at night with not much to do, you're telling stories, and you're telling stories about characters that you're familiar with. So you go, okay, one day Thor went fishing. It's like, oh, I know who Thor is. I know his demeanor. Let's hear about this. You know, and that's kind of where that came from. In the myths, many of the myths did survive. A lot of them are lost because it was oral tradition, and a lot of them didn't write. From what we understand of those myths, and you compare that to something like what you're talking about, the polytheism that existed in Turkey, or the polytheism that still exists in Japan, there's a lot of similarities.
Yes.
People with no connection to one another across the world in antiquity believed largely the same things. Japan, Scandinavia. These people never connected in 800 AD. Never. And they had the same viewpoint on ancestry and how you can view and how you can communicate with them. What are the odds of that? They
Well,
had the same view on polytheism.
it's
You can
it's
sacrifice things in
it's
return for
it's
something else.
interesting that you mentioned that because there have been made recent discoveries, and coincidentally, the dig site is in Turkey. I'm pretty sure you've heard of it. It was international news with Potbelly Hill, that they're now certain that 12,000 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, there are pillars, so to describe, and on those pillars are inscriptions of languages all over the world, ranging from South America to Africa to Scandinavia to Central Asia and even the Far East. And it just threw everyone off guard. No one expected it, but they're trying to find out now if the inscriptions of the different languages were inscribed later or if it was all done at the same period of time. And one of the things that is really interesting about Potbelly Hill, or for people who are Turkish, Göbekli Tepe, is there are a lot of signs that show that the hill didn't succumb to natural deformation, but it was actually buried by men itself. So they think or they assume that something was about to happen or that it got banned or whatever, and they manually with man labor hidden the I guess the temple it is called. So I truly believe like this is also one of the reasons I absolutely can't stand racism. I We are all connected in one way, shape, or form. And for example, Norse paganism and Tengrism are just very similar in a lot of respects. And there it, we're connected some way or form. There is we are too similar. Humans are too similar. And that's why I'm always curious and always interested in hearing different perspectives. So, for example, your Norse pagan perspective. I'm curious. I want to know. It's like, how do you view the world? I've been talking to you for close to what, 3 hours, not 2 hours? I don't remember. I don't even know how
3
long.
hours, yeah.
3 hours. I fuck with you. I get it. I can't put it in words, but I get it. It's interesting. Um,
I agree with you, though. I think we are more connected than we are dissimilar, no matter where you are from in the world.
Right. And this is not to
We,
dispute what you were saying about the 800 AD, by the way. This is just something that I found interesting couple months ago. Um,
as far
Norse,
as we can tell, there was no influence between that was exchanged between Scandinavia and Japan at that time period.
right, right.
And
Or
I mean,
do we even know when Japan got inhabited? Like, that's a very deep question if you ask me, unless obviously if you know the answer. But
I don't know the answer. I'm sure
yeah,
we could look it up.
because
Want
as
me to look
far
it
as,
up?
feel free, as far as I know, Japan got populated significantly later, if I'm not mistaken, but I might be wrong. Um,
Uh, well, according to the Google machine, it says it was inhabited around 30,000 BC.
oh,
I
I'm
don't
way
know.
off.
I
I'm
don't know
way
how to pre-check that. Let's see. They've been traced to prehistoric times around 30,000 BC. The Yamon period, named after its cord-marked pottery, was followed by the Yayoi period in the first millennium BC, when new inventions were introduced from Asia.
okay.
And again, that's
Yeah,
Wikipedia, so I would have to look more into it to actually verify it. But the initial response is around 30,000 BC.
right. Well, I was mad off, and let's try get back on track. Norse paganism, and what were we talking about? Talking about the
I was
runes?
talking about. So I was talking about the comparison of how the Japanese and the Norse
Oh,
pagans
yeah,
viewed ancestry and polytheism,
right.
and how similar they are in approach, but they are such widely different cultures that it's like, what are the odds that they actually think that much alike? Other than them being humans, they didn't share anything in common.
I
You
love
know what I
that.
mean?
Yeah,
They're on opposite sides of the world.
it's beautiful in a way.
It really is. But that also sort of solidifies that, in what I believe, I may call one of the gods Tyr, and you may call it something entirely different. But we're talking about the same thing. It's how we approach it and how we regard it that's going to be mildly different, but we're way too similar for that to be just pure chance, you
I
know?
agree. I agree.
Here's an idea that I've actually proposed because I've been, not physically, I've been verbally attacked for being a Norse pagan, specifically by Christians. Like, if you keep doing what you're doing, that's devil worship. You're going to hell and everything. Which, by the way, coincidentally, I believe in hell, only spelled with one L, and it's not a bad place. But anyway, so I'm like, okay, I'll go to hell. That's all right. Like
See
it's
ya.
it's never cold there. Okay. Um, but that made me think, what if the Christian God, whatever you want to call him, Yahweh, what if he is just one among many of the Norse pantheon gods? So Odin, Thor, Tyr, Freya, Freyr, Yahweh. What if he's just one of them? If you look at the Bible itself, it says, and you can quote God, where he says, I am a jealous God, right? Maybe he's the God of jealousy.
Hmm.
Okay, so he's the God of jealousy. Let's assume this is true. We also know in the Bible it says, "You'll have no other gods before me." I'm
Sounds
seeing a
jealous.
pattern.
Yeah.
Sounds jealous. Okay. And now he says, "If you follow me and you do what I say in my commandments and the way that I want you to live, then after you die, you get to come live in my hall, which we call heaven. If not, you'll go to hell." Wait, there's already a hell. And that's where most people go anyway. This is all falling together for me.
Yeah.
There is absolutely no documentation to support this. This was a thought experiment that I came up with. But it actually fits. And there's nothing in my religion that says that's not a complete possibility.
Right.
It's just food for thought.
Hmm. I got a quick question, and I'm very curious. If you know, you know. If you don't want, if you want to talk about it, feel free. Do you have Scandinavian roots or Germanic roots?
Yes.
I can kind of see them. I can kind of see it.
Yep.
Is it uh, all the way up north, or is it mainland Europe? If you know by any chance.
As an American, I'm a bit of a mutt, but I'm over 50% Germanic and then about another 20% from Scandinavia
Okay.
genetically.
Mm-hmm.
And then a little bit of Irish, like 10%, and then somehow like got like 15% Chinese in there.
15%
Somebody
Chinese.
I'm 15% Chinese according to my genetic code,
Huh. Interesting.
which is, yeah, somebody was dipping into the Asian persuasion, but uh, yep, that one threw me off.
I'm very tempted to. Did you do 23 and me or did you do a different one?
Say again?
Did you do 23 and me or did you do a different one?
Oh, I did this a couple years ago. I'd have to go back and find the email to see which company did it.
Because I'm very curious to do it as well. Very curious.
So I had done it probably 15 years ago or so,
Hmm.
and I didn't believe it. And it gave me way different results. And so because I didn't believe it, I did it two more times with the
Okay.
same sample. And all three examples were wildly inconsistent.
Mm.
Some were like, "Oh, you're 60% Irish and you're 20% Scottish," and then the next one, "Oh, you're actually 80% Norwegian." I'm like, "What the? That's so like." All right, I understand the percentages being off a little, but it was so widely different that I didn't believe it.
Right.
And so whenever I did this last one, I did my homework on it to see how it was accomplished, and I believed it. And so I believe these results.
Hmm.
But I also can trace my ancestry back to about 1470 or so.
That's pretty good.
Um, it's not bad.
For
It's not bad.
with all due respect for an American citizen, that's pretty good.
Yeah, no, it really is. And but I've actually found, and it's not to credit me. That's actually to credit my grandfather mostly. He's the one that was in the library all the time, digging up documents and like visiting foreign countries and finding their documents and
Oh
making
wow.
copies of stuff. He was really into it.
Wow.
Um, Yep. So I was able to take some of his work and stretch it back a little further, but yep, that's where it came from. That would be my son.
That's perfectly fine.
Hang on just a second.
Sorry, honey.
It's okay. I should lock that door.
It's all good. Um,
Okay.
for example, with my ancestry, my mom's side, so my grandmother, for example, her family was really well off. And from the stories that have been told from generation upon generation, what I gathered from my mom's side was that they were Turkic and they were traveling merchants from the Persian Empire to the Ottoman Empire.
Okay.
They were like so the mm, I don't know how to translate it, but it's like the second Silk Route type of stuff, and they were very wealthy merchants, and I'm talking about like 20, 30 caravans of like
Yeah.
trades, like huge. And
Silk Road. I know that.
yeah, it's not the actual Silk Road, but it's like a branching off of the Silk Road.
Just a known trade route.
Yeah, yeah. And from what I've gathered from my dad's side was my father's side, surprisingly to my father, was mm, I don't know the correct word, but they were they were working with the Ottoman Empire. So they were soldiers, they were bureaucrats, they were um, servants of the Sultan. So the father's side was very into governmental positions, and my mom's
Diplomats.
diplomats, sorta, yeah. And my mom's side was more about the trade and the wealth and the money, like the merchants, really. It's very interesting.
Commerce. Okay.
Commerce, exactly. And I'm not sure if this is a bit of Turkish pride within my family, but as far as I've been able to, or patriotism, nationalism, rather, it's the correct terminology, nationalism. Um, for as far as I've been told, we should be pretty Turkic. So if I did a DNA check, it should probably say Central Asia. But centuries have passed; they're bound, guaranteed, to be other nationalities and ethnicities and stuff in there. But I'm very curious. I'm very interested because um, I'm like the camera settings right now are a little bit off for anyone that's watching this with video on. These aren't my normal camera settings. I had to improvise a little bit, but I'm very pretty white, even for a Turkish person. I'm very white, and you don't see that in Turkic people that have come from, for example, northern Iran nowadays or northern Persian kingdom. That's more about Crimeas or the what people would, for example, nowadays we call the Dagestanis or the Circassians, more up north and the southern Russian region. So that's also very interesting. So it's like, am I from the northern branch or am I from the southern branch? Because in the 1100s we kind of swayed over to now modern day Turkey and modern day Ukraine. So I'm very interested in that. I love it.
I've actually got a question for you.
Yeah.
When did you migrate from Turkey to Netherlands?
When I was around the age of 5.
Oh,
It's a
wow. So really young.
yeah, very young. It was like 23, almost 24 years ago. I'm almost 28, 29. Um, it's a funny story actually, and it's a story that I recently told my fiance because we were looking through photo albums, and so let me take everyone back until till the was it the 60s? Yeah, the 60s. In the 60s, when my grandfather was still working for NATO, he was a engineer, if I'm not mistaken, a physical like engineer, like working mechanic. And during that time, Europe was still recovering from the Second World War, so they needed a lot of labor. And during that time, I'm sure you can fill on this. There was a major request for labor in Canada for some reason. I don't know why, but there was a major request for labor, cheap labor. So my grandfather, being a soldier or being of the Turkish army, he got a little bit of a priority to say, "Hey, listen, fill in this top 5 countries that you would like to work in. If you wish to go abroad, name them, and we're gonna go off of priority." Number one was Canada. Number two was Germany, I think, and number three was I'm just gonna make one of probably Spain or something. So the Netherlands wasn't even in there. My grandfather gets put on guess a boat or a ship or whatever, not in those days. Flies over, ends up in the Netherlands by mistake. Finds a job here, yeah. Decides he likes it, gets put in an immigrant house back in the days, like 20 laborers in one building, everyone one kitchen, works there. Money is good, he likes it. 5 to 10 years later, he decides to bring his family over. My mom was then born, was already born, so he left his family in Turkey, brought him into the Netherlands. My mom grew up here until her well into her 30s. My mom decides to go to Turkey for a holiday. She's sitting at a hotel. There's like this karaoke contest going on, and my dad is there. And my dad at that time was a very, very successful accountant, bookkeeper, very good with numbers. And in those days, whoever could scam the government the most with the money was seen as the big. It was almost a national sport. So he had all the money,
Oh, that's an
and
international thing, man. Like that's Donald Trump.
yes,
Those are the years he continued to grow his fortune, man. Same thing.
80s money, bro. 80s money hits
Yeah.
different. Um, so my dad sees my mom, instantly falls in love. So what does my dad do? Wait, it wasn't a karaoke. It was something else. You could buy a raffle. It was a raffle. That was it. It was a raffle. It wasn't a karaoke. So what does my dad do? My dad pulls the guy aside with the raffle. Goes, how many tickets do you have? The guy goes, well, we got as many as we have guests. He goes, I want all of them. So the dude's like, what are you talking about? He's like, I want all of them. Give me all the tickets. I don't care how much money it is. He gets all the tickets, sits down, and lo and behold, my dad wins. What does my dad do? He stands up, grabs my mom by the arm, pulls her to the stage, and accepts the gift or the prize or whatever with her. So they don't even know each other. And there's actually a picture of them literally 5 seconds into meeting one another. So they meet, they hit it off. My mom goes back to the Netherlands. They keep writing, they call each other. It works. My dad visits, yada, yada, yada. And my dad goes, hey, my dad proposes, like, goes to my grandfather, listen, I've grown an interest to your daughter. I wish to marry her with your blessing, all the stuff. My grandfather goes, hey, it's her life, she can decide. My mom goes, I'll marry you. But my dad goes, well, with one exception. I will not move to the Netherlands. You have to come back with me to Turkey. So my mom packs her bag, drops her job, her successful job at, it got renamed recently. It's the biggest hospital in the Netherlands. The Erasmus. Well, it used to be the Erasmus hospital in Rotterdam. Leaves her job, goes to Turkey, has me, and then for some reason, I still haven't really found out the main reason. They told me it was for educational reasons. They bring me to the Netherlands when I was 4 years old, and here I am.
Huh.
But yeah, I'm not physically, not like with facial expressions, but I'm a spitting image of my father. I'm I could totally see myself do the same thing. Just grabbing a random beautiful girl and be like, you're coming with me onto stage. We won. And she's just there like, what the fuck?
It's funny how that works out genetically sometimes. My
Right?
son is a spitting image of me.
Really?
Like you put a beard on him, he looks just like me. Swear to God. He my wife was a little bit furious when he was born. She's like, I carried you for 9 months. I put in all this work and you come out looking like him? Like, whoa, the audacity. But he does, man. He's I remember when he was born, he came out, he was a C-section baby. So I got to watch them pull him out of my wife. And the first thing was they brought him over to me. He's still kind of messy. I don't care. They got him in like this cloth. And I look at his foot. And I've got very wide hands and very wide feet. Just it's one of my weird things. Like my hands are actually wider than longer.
Okay.
Like you don't see that. But like your middle finger should come up to be about even with your palm. My palm is still wider than my finger.
Oh wow. I've never. Okay. Interesting.
Well, my feet are the same way. My feet are wide. I have to buy wide shoes. And I looked at this foot and I was like, that's my foot. He's got my foot. And yeah, man, he came out, he looked just like me. And now he's almost 4 years old. And I look at him sometimes and I'm like, man, you used to fit right here. What happened? Now he's like 50 pounds.
Yeah. I
It's
don't look
insane.
like anyone in the family.
Really?
Yeah, I've got
I,
a little bit of everyone. I'm literally just like a copy paste of everyone, just parts. I've got
I don't
the.
look like anybody in my family either, man. Like it's wild.
It's scary sometimes because when you're a kid, they always joke. It's like, haha, we found you in front of the mosque, or haha, we found you at the second-hand store, or we felt sorry for you. You were crawling through our garbage, and it's like, I don't look like anyone. Like, what the fuck is going? Are you serious? Like,
That's weird. My dad has thick, curly black hair, brown eyes. My mom has dark brown eyes, dark brown hair. It is straight though. And they're both darker than I am in complexion. I'm pasty white in comparison to them.
oh wow.
And it was like, okay, now I've got this like auburn reddish hair with blue eyes. I'm taller than both of them by several inches. Like my dad is only about 5'8", 5'9",
Hmm.
and I'm 6 foot, 6'1".
Oh
My
okay.
mom's about 5'7". So it's like I'm taller, I'm broader. My shoulders are much broader. It was like, where are you people in me? Like, are you sure you didn't get bored and like fuck the plumber or something? Like, what happened?
No, it's funny how that works. It's funny how genetics work. Because I've been told by the the elders in my family that I resemble X and I resemble Y and I resemble whoever. It's like it's well, okay, but if I don't get to see that person, I can't really take your word for it because it's like, do I really? Are you trying to compliment me or do I really look like said person? I do have. For me, it's very different. I'm just a copy paste of everything, of everyone in my family. Whether it's my short fuse, whether it's my eyes, whether it's my smile, everything is just copy paste. So I can kind of see it. So there's like no fucking around, at least.
Hmm.
But yeah,
I
sometimes
think
like,
that's about the one thing I got from my father was my temperament.
mm,
Just kind of stoic, intellectual. That's kind of where I fall in. I like to think about things before I do anything.
yeah,
That's my dad.
I've been, I've kind of grown out of it. I've started becoming more laid back. Like there are moments where I still monkey around, but I've really noticed myself getting a lot more laid back, more like, okay, think before you speak. These are just emotions. Take a second, don't respond immediately. And I've really noticed that with for the last couple of years, especially what's been going on in my life and with my fiance. Because women are different. They're a lot more emotional than us, and they take it a
Yeah.
lot more to heart what you say and how you say it. And it's one of those things I've really started to learn. Is like, okay, no, sweetheart, I don't mean it like that. What I meant was like, so instead of no, listen, shut up, listen.
Dude, women are a different breed. I
I
was
love
driving in
them.
the car yesterday. Check this out. I don't remember what it was she asked me. Oh, she got on a new medication for anxiety.
Hmm.
And so when we go somewhere, she's supposed to take this medication before we leave so that she doesn't become anxious. That's what it's designed to do. So we're driving in the car, and she says something along the lines of, "You like me better now than before I took the medicine, don't you?"
Oh my god, how are you gonna respond to that?
What I said was, "That does not warrant a response. There is no good answer for that. I'm
You
not
should have been
answering
a
that."
lawyer.
That's where I sat, and I will die on that hill. It's like there's no good answer for that. If I say yes, oh, well, then you don't love me for me. You love the medicine. If I say no, oh, you don't like me right now? I said, no, I'm not answering that.
That is such a setup.
Like, you're just you. And I love you. That's it.
Oh, love it. I love women. I love them. They're beautiful. They are. I don't want to start another conversation, but the whole debacle, the whole BS that's been on the news, let's keep it at that. In the media, not on the news, in the media, men and women fit each other. Men start life with a missing piece, and women start life with a missing piece, and that missing piece is just the other. It truly is. We can't do without each other.
We
It's
definitely need both perspectives.
yes. I love women.
Whether or not you're oriented that way doesn't matter. You're still going to have influence from the opposite gender, one way or another.
Right. Cal, I'm getting hungry. Should we call the day?
Okay. Sure, man. We can do this
Um,
another time if you like.
for sure. Let's continue another time. Before we head off, though, you recently told me that you wanted to pick up streaming. So if there's anything that you want to say, anything that you want to plug, or maybe end it with like an army quote or whatever, the stage is yours. Feel free to say whatever you want.
Yeah, I started streaming about 3 weeks ago. I was initially streaming Rocket League, but I've become a variety streamer because I'm also pretty heavily into music. So I've been streaming my music as well as music feedback in addition to Rocket League, and then just sort of another day where I try out other games. I definitely try to hold a level of intellectual, thought provoking conversation, though, which is really the meat of my content. And I really hope that's true for most streamers. They should try to interact with their viewers so that they want to be there for that person, not for the game they're playing. Because I think that's way more meaningful. And that's what I'm trying to elicit in my content. So my Twitch handle is Crixus with 5 underscores after it. You can also follow me on Twitter. That's CR Miner 1988. Charlie Romeo MINER 1988. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I do update a bit about what's going on in my life, and then I also announce my streams and stuff there. And I did tell a friend of mine before we end this that I was going to mention him because you guys live in proximity. He's also a streamer from the Netherlands,
Oh,
and he's also a Rocket League coach.
oh, actually,
His name or his handle is Beastbound.
yeah, I've heard of him.
Okay, so he had heard of you, but he had said you guys had never really connected, and I thought I would bring that up with you because he's a fantastic guy. He
Oh,
really is.
oh, that's awesome. That's
So,
awesome.
if
Thank
yeah,
you.
after we get done with this, I'll hit you up with his info. But Beastbound is also a very intelligent guy, really fun to hang out with. He's got a great personality, and I think you guys would get along pretty well.
Well, thank you for mentioning my name, Tim. I really appreciate that. I did not see that one coming. Wow. I don't know how to behave right now, act right now. Thank you.
It's okay, man. You put out great content, and that's actually how we met. Was I found your stream? I was watching your stream lightly 3 years ago or something, part of RLCD. And I kind of watched off and on, wasn't really into it. And then over the course of the last probably month or so, when I decided I was going to begin streaming, I started trying to look at content creators that were going to have sort of similar content and see how they were having so much success. And I landed on your channel.
Wow.
And I didn't want to do what you were doing necessarily, but I wanted to see the certain elements that you were doing that brought success to your channel. And that was one of the things I picked up was actually from you there was the way you interact with your viewers was here's the main take I took from your content is it's not just that you interact with viewers, it's that you are open with your personality to a degree even on stream so people get to know who you really are.
Yeah.
It's not just about the coaching because you could make that dry and boring if all you did was pout out facts. But you actually show them, no, this pisses me off. Why aren't you doing? Move your ass. I hear that all the time on your stream.
I think it's
But
very important to be you and not be
yeah,
ashamed of your faults and your shortcomings. I have many, and I'm aware of them. And if there's one thing I don't like in life is lies and fake anything, whether that's a person, a character, a drink, a brand, whatever. I don't give me reality because that's what I would appreciate. And what I think of you is besides that. That's what I try to do.
well, sure. I mean, I think anything is better than being lied to.
Yeah.
And I think that anybody that's genuine and anybody that you could call a real friend will openly disagree with you.
Yeah.
Even if it hurts your feelings a little bit, that's better than finding out they lied to you.
Yep.
Then you're not your friend anymore.
Yep. There's a lot of people around me who I disagree with heavily on many things, but I would still call them friends
Yeah,
We can disagree on
absolutely.
stuff and not be enemies. It's
Right.
normal. It's healthy.
It is normal and it is healthy and it's perfectly okay.
Exactly.
Like we don't have to agree on everything in order to coexist
It's
and
boring.
even like one another. Yeah.
Yeah.
Would the world be that much better if you and I weren't so different?
Oh my God. Can you imagine you screaming at teenagers and me being in the army? That I don't think that's a good idea.
No, I don't think so. No, I think the world is better because we are different and because we have different perspectives and because we approach things in different ways. It keeps things interesting.
It does.
If everybody's cookie cutter, then it doesn't mean anything.
Boring.
But yeah, I know you're trying to wrap up here, so we'll do
It's
that.
fine. Um, I got nothing. I'll put all his socials in the descriptions so you guys can check him out, and definitely do give him a check. Whether that's on Twitter, on Discord, or on Twitch. Definitely do that. Um, let's wrap it up. Take care, everyone. Thanks for listening. Until next time, Cal.
See you, man.
Oh my God, I almost had a heart attack.